Can everybody?
Okay, so I hope you can all see that.
No. Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Right, just going to do a couple of things. There we go. Right now, I'm ready to talk. So I've called this talk, It's All in the Jelly. It doesn't really refer to the actual jelly, but obviously the whole talk is to getting that jelly to your larvae. And I want to show you how you can do so many things to get better and better queen cells. And to me, it's like a continuous challenge to get better cells. Okay. So first of all, these are the topics. So I will run through. I'm going to do a little bit about me, but not much because there's so much to talk about the queen rearing. An overview of my operation. Again, it's minimized down. Then obviously we get to the queen rearing, how I raise my queens, and then raising queens on a small scale. And then we'll do the questions after. And we may well have a bit of a break after my presentation, depending how long it takes. So a little bit about me, 49 years old, born and grew up in Jersey, Channel Islands, studied horticulture in Hadler College in Kent. And then I completely changed my track and became a paramedic with the State to Jersey Ambulance Service. And then I changed it all again, jacked that in, came back, moved to France, and then came back to horticulture, picked up the reins and worked as a landscape gardener until 2020, which was only last autumn. And what I mean by that is I got my first hives in 2009, and then I've grown in beekeeping and done less and less landscape gardening until last October, when I was able to finally give it up. Well, I wasn't able to, I had no choice because I could no longer do the two jobs at once. And that's the problem you have. Trying to do two jobs at once in April, May, June is a nightmare. So professional beekeeper since January 2019. And then, as I say, from then on, I've been growing and growing. So the current operation, I have around 200 production hives, around 100 nucleus colonies, and around 60 mini plus colonies. And you all know that goes up and down. In the spring, obviously, we sell our nukes. We have winter losses like everybody else. And then you rebuild it again through the year with making queens and making nukes and then requeening your hives. It's just a continuous circle. So this is where I live. I live in a beautiful house in the middle of the French countryside in Bretagne. This was it nearly 3 weeks ago now. 3 weeks today, we had this when I woke up in the morning. Beautiful, beautiful dose of snow. It lasted about a week, so we do get some snow, but this was the first time we've had it since 2010, I think. So it gives you some idea. We don't often have that cold weather. But there again, that's some of my mini plus hives. Beautiful to see in the snow, but one day of it was enough for me. But that's what you get. It looks absolutely gorgeous. So this is where I live. I'm surrounded by a valley. Where that little pin is, that's my house. And we are actually quite high up here. So it's difficult to give you the scale, but I'm about 3.5 kilometers from my main village of Corseul, and which is an old Roman Gallo village. It was a big trading village in Roman times, and you've still got some of the original, artifacts there. There's a museum you can see. It's good fun. This is roughly, that red area is roughly where I have my hives. And that's obviously where my house is. I've got some to the north, all around basically. What I've done is I've grown away from where I live, but I try and keep about 3 kilometers between each apiary. Not so much for disease control, but more so because we don't have huge flows and we want to give each colony good amount of food. Otherwise we end up feeding a lot. So again, this gives you some idea where we are. If you look at this, you can't see it that clearly, but you see there's lots of like rural pockets where we are, and also some villages. So we get lots of gardens. It's a kind of, it's an area that's becoming more and more urbanized. The villages are all growing. All these people are buying plants and shrubs and having gardens. So where I am is actually gets better and better because there's always that little bit extra, that little shrub that's grown there, and as well as that, you still get all the original flora around the area. Huge diversity in pollens. That's what we get. This picture was actually taken from a field of oilseed rape, which was actually at the bottom of my garden, and I had the pollen trap literally on a hive the other side of the road. So you can see this is obviously the yellow from oilseed rape, and there is some horse chestnut. That is probably some lake gorse, and I haven't looked up the others. I did, but I've forgotten them. But we get huge diversity in pollens. That's what I'm saying. So it's really good for our bees that they get different amino acids, different proteins. So I'm going to run through a little bit about our spring and summer. We have this is just finishing now. This is mimosa and it comes out between February and March. Some years we get it, some years we don't. We get this blackthorn, Prunus spinosa, everybody gets that. This is kind of in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll see an apiary like this. Dandelions are just coming out. We are fairly mild here. We do kind of benefit really from, we're very much like Cornwall, I suppose you could say. We do benefit from the English Channel and that kind of airflow, which we seem to get more often than not now. And that's why it's very, very rainy and drizzly over the winter. So there's the dandelions, fields of dandelions. Then we get the cherries, the wild cherries and the domestic cherries. And then we get this, which is obviously oilseed rape or rapeseed oil or canola, a lot of people call it. It's sown here by all the farmers still. You don't have to move your hives. As I said, we're non-migratory. You just can't seem to get away from the stuff. But to be honest, I prefer to have it than not. And we're lucky that we have it, to be honest, because it does boost your honey flow in the spring. This is a picture of the hedge in my garden. This is a hawthorn. Crataegus monogyna, which I planted 130 meters of it in my garden, and it's absolutely fantastic. In front, you've got a lovely bird cherry, Prunus pedis, and they're all really good nectar-giving plants. But I have this picture because I like to show that when this hawthorn is in flower, it is the end of my nectar flow for the spring. It comes down like a curtain, and there's no more nectar. So spring honey, very quick to crystallize. Certain areas better than others. We get to know what's better, what isn't. You have to pull your honey. We try and put our supers on within sort of the second week of the rapeseed. We keep equalizing until then and maybe taking some bees off just to keep the colonies really strong. But then we try and put the supers on so that they're completely ready to do a full 3 weeks of harvesting the spring honey. And then we obviously leave it a week or two, but we have to harvest it after the 4 weeks, because otherwise it starts to crystallize and your profit then obviously goes up. I will add, but obviously I am a commercial beekeeper and I have to make things pay. So I've got to be really careful and work really hard at certain times, like we all have to. So our June gap, this word June gap, our June gap comes, it's actually mid-May to mid-June. And we are basically about 2 weeks behind the UK in most of our things we have. When I speak to people in the Midlands from here, they say to me, well, we're kind of 3 weeks away. When I speak to people on the South Coast, it's like 2 weeks. So in that gap, we get very little pollen, very little nectar, virtually nothing. But we still get fairly good pollen. So you can start your queen rearing, you can make splits, and you are doing the impression of a headless chicken then, because everything comes at once and it's just chaos. I always say that once I'm through kind of end of May, June, I'm actually fairly relaxed because the summer harvest does itself because your colonies are ready, and then you can harvest your summer honey when you want. But getting that spring honey off and keeping bees in boxes, not swarming, is the biggest job of all. Because if you lose your spring bees, then you'll lose your summer honey crop as well. So an example of this, we've got some early mated nucleus colonies, and they're ready, mated in early June, some early spring splits. They will then go into production, or you can just sell them, but they'll either go into production colonies and they'll grow with the summer flow, and then I won't have to feed them into the winter. That's the kind of thing we try and do, but our season is very short here. Come the middle of July, our nectar flow finishes. So we have, as I said, a summer honey harvest, mostly chestnut and bramble from mid-June to mid-July, typical apiary. Lots of bramble. The great thing about the bramble is the bramble softens the chestnut we have, and we have an awful lot of chestnut. If we didn't have the bramble, the chestnut is almost too strong and it wouldn't be very sellable. Well, I wouldn't say wouldn't be sellable, but it would be a different kind of market that would go for it. Whereas the one we have here is very soft, so you get that slight strength of the chestnut, but not the full-on power. It's not like, oh, it's almost too strong pure chestnut. So bramble is absolutely brilliant. We get loads of it here too. There's our chestnut trees. We get absolutely loads of these. I don't know what would happen to my summer honey if we didn't have chestnut. In America now, where I've visited around Vermont, there is no sweet chestnut at all because they have a virus and they've all died out. And there used to be loads of it. So That's what the flowers look like. I'm sure you have it in the UK, but when I speak to people in the UK, many people don't have that many in a sort of one area. They have one or two, so you don't often get a chestnut scented honey. That's the kind of valleys we get, absolutely full to the brim of chestnut trees. If you look carefully, you can see, for instance, that one there, that's in full bloom. Some haven't even opened. The picture doesn't really do it justice, but I wanted just to show you the size and the scale of the trees we get. And the chestnut flow, if we have some good groundwater late spring, the chestnut flow will carry on for a month, and it can be really good. Some years it's just 2 weeks and then it's finished. There's some summer honey. Just to give you some idea, our supers, we sometimes get supers that are really, really completely packed. They're not all like that all the time. And I've got a picture later on. One super there, for example, will hold 28 to 30 kilos. So that's on one. So that's about 64 pounds in weight of honey. So even though our hives don't look as though there's a lot of honey there, there's a lot of weight of honey there because they're day-daunt hives and they're bigger and deeper. So we do okay. Our summer flow is quite prolific when it comes. So I have a workshop I share with my colleague, and I'm going to be buying this sooner or later. But in that, it means we've got plenty of storage, which you need for being a commercial beekeeper. You need somewhere to put your supers. This is late summer picture, and most of the supers are actually out. And we've got 2 barns like this. One is behind the front picture you just saw, and this is to the left where you've got more storage. And we never seem to have enough space. It's just amazing how much space you need. We have a mating station we use, which has become really handy. And we do find that even though there's a lot of other beekeepers around us, if we use the mating station correctly, even though it's not an isolated mating station, we do get good results, and we seem to get good, we obviously have mostly buckfast, but we do seem to get true to type mating, and we get good daughters from the queens we produce. So this is our extraction unit. It's very simple. I've been through this before on another video. So if you just bear with me a minute, I'm just going to rattle through this quickly. We have honey super frames come in here. We bring them in on these pallets, okay, and they're on rollers. So we are a little bit able to take out the weight of lifting things. We roll the pallets in. And there's one set of rollers there, and that holds 2 stacks of supers. And of that, then we can wheel that in from the other side of the workshop, and then we can de-super them from the debox them here. And then when we debox them, then the frames go through this decapper. Now this decapper is a vertical spinning decapper. It has 2 spinning flanges each side. The frames pass through and they end up this side. So that's the kind of mechanization we have. It's not very advanced. There's new machines out now that would do a different job. But for us, because we have this equipment, it works just fine. It's just, you have to use what you have, and it's paid for. So it's kind of, not worth updating. Underneath, we have a honey spinner, and all I can say it's like the old-fashioned washing spinners that you used to have in the kitchen that rattle across the floor, only this is bolted down, and this weighs an absolute ton. But in here, we have a drum that when the cappings fall off the frame, they go down here into this drum, and then they are spun, and then the honey comes out here. So that's honey we get back. And we can add that straight into the barrel because it's clean and it's honey from the cappings, and the cappings then are dry and ready to melt down. We don't have to do anything else to them. So as we take off the decapped frames, we give them a visual inspection. Sometimes you have to scratch them a little bit more. Then they go into the twin extractors here. From the twin extractors, they run obviously alternately. When one's full, you put it on, you fill up the next one. But when there's 2 of you, it works brilliantly. When there's one, it's just a little bit more harder work. But it's a good system, it works. Then the honey goes into the sump from the extractors. And from there, it migrates along this sump and ends up at the end where you have a float switch, and then it's pumped into the barrel. So here is where we can actually do quite a lot. We can remove the wax, because here there are little baffles that collect the wax. So we can kind of, we're always working. There's always something to do, clean this, clean that, but it keeps working. It works really fine, So this is a picture from the other end. You can see the honey that comes out, the 2 extractors, goes down this this sump and then arrives in the barrel. You can see our kind of rollers we use in the workshop to move our heavy supers around. So I've only got to take them off the truck and get them on the supers, and then once we get them on there, the big lifting is done. But it's something we're always looking to mechanize, but then you're into forklifts, you're into pallets. It's another world. It's a different thing we can't go to at the moment. So this is what we like to have in the summer, nice full supers. Every spring we rebuild any dirty frames from the previous year, and you'll notice these are 10 frames in a super, so that what these were cleaned and pressure washed, these frames, because they had pollen in the previous year, and we rebuild them on a frame of 10. We have to build them on 10s, because if we build them on 8s, they will be built in between. The bees don't build them out properly. And then after that, when obviously after the harvest, that's exactly what you get when you got the configuration of 10 frames per super. You end up with honey, but you don't end up with wide frames. But it's still honey, and the frames have been rebuilt and they're re-waxed, so that works well. And then when we use them next time, we change their boxes and put them into boxes of 8s, and that's when you can get some real honey on a frame, because the comb is already built, and it means that you're using less boxes. Sorry, you're using the same amount of boxes, but less frames, and you're more efficient with your transport and your honey extraction. And this is obviously mostly in the summer. So that's, as I said before, that's in kilos. Sometimes we get some really good weight of supers, just as an example to show what we get and to give you some idea of the flows we get. Handsome chap, nice frame of honey, that's summer chestnut. So exactly what we want to see. That makes me happy. There's an even happier sight. The end result is honey in the barrel. This is an example of what is on our shelves at the supermarket at the moment. I'm not going to go into what's fake and what's real, but you can make up your mind yourself. But there is a lot of EU and non-EU blended honeys in this. That's the buzzword at the moment. But my point is, to have this, you need this. You need prolific queens. You cannot get honey without having good queens and good colonies. And obviously the key to good colonies is well-raised, well-mated queens. So onto the queen rearing section. Why should we try and raise queens? Don't the bees do a good enough job themselves? Well, I've written down some reasons why here, but catching and waiting for swarms isn't reliable. You don't know the origin, the age, and the prolificness of the queen, whether she's black, whether she's a local queen, whether she's an F1, whether she's F20, whatever. You don't know where she's come from. Importing bees from faraway places does not necessarily guarantee you good queens. The queens you can raise in your own area will be better suited to your area at a fraction of the cost if you can raise your own. You want to go for overall improvement to your stock. You want to improve pest and disease resistance by selective breeding queens and grafting from better selected colonies that outperform others. And that's how you basically do it anyway. You want to improve your honey crops. You want to have more prolific queens and stronger colonies, less swarming. Queens are placed at programmed intervals. That's why we want to raise queens as well, because we can do that. And then by having replaced queens, they're less likely to swarm, so you don't lose your bees. You speed up your production process. If you're making nucs, you can get your nucs ready and you have queens out and mated within probably 20 days from start to finish. So it's not always like that, but that's what you aim for. It speeds everything up. You can get increased successful mating at planned times of the year, because you are doing the meat of the work when you know that you're going to have good drones around. So how can you raise some good queens? You need to have a realistic plan. You need to look at your requirements. What are you trying to achieve? Look at the resources you've got. Look at your season and your nectar flows. Raise your queens only when the bees would be doing it. Work with your bees. Be realistic and consider a group production, 2 or more beekeepers or a club. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It's something you have to just work together. I know a lot of people who really like to have a go, and if there's 2 or 3 people with, say, 10 hives combined, it's completely possible, as you'll see shortly. So which queen rearing method is for you? So I could have listed all these methods, and there is an awful lot of different ways of raising queens. I prefer the Mike Palmer 10/10 method because I find it works for me. I've tried the cloak board method. I've tried numerous different ways. And sometimes when you're raising queens, some methods come in while you're doing it and go, oh, that's actually that method. Or it's kind of when you do so much queen rearing, you touch on many areas. But I stick to what I know because, as I said at the start, it works for me. How can you decide on which method is for you? Do you have any combined previous experience? So you might be with a group, a beekeeping group. That's great. Books will explain all the methods, but you probably still won't know which one to go for. So you have to try something. You just got to go with something at the start if you don't have anyone to work with. And nowadays, the more recent methods revolve around a simplified swarm box starter, queen right finisher. And most methods now are akin to that, okay? So when is the right time to attempt to make queen cells? As I said before, let the bees tell you. When the bees start swarming in your area, as you gain experience, you'll know roughly when that is the time in your area. And you'll hear me say that a lot. Every area is different completely. And it's only local knowledge that will give you that idea of when the right time is to do it. Naturally, late spring and summer are the best times of the year. High forager numbers bringing plenty of pollen and nectar during the nectar flows. Good mature drones able to fly well on warm sunny afternoons. That's obviously the best time to raise queens. You'll see the presence of drone brood in your colonies, and that's a good indicator that queens should have drones to mate within a few weeks. So we need to look at bees first to understand when and how the bees make their queens and why they do it. And there's three basic methods when bees need to make queen cells. Because if we understand that, we have a key to mimicking that to our purpose. So we can control it and not them, but we need to understand it thoroughly before you can do it yourself. So the first natural way, it's not the first, it's one of the three natural ways, but I've just gone for this one first. This is the emergency response, okay? The bees need to make a queen because the queen is suddenly missing or she's injured. She may have swarmed and there may be no queen cells in the colony to take over from that swarm queen, or she just may have been crushed by the beekeeper. It happens. This is the emergency response. And bees immediately draw up one or more cells and change a worker bee's caste to become a queen bee. Cells are generally in the middle of the brood frame, but sometimes they're all over it. But generally they're in the middle where the larvae was. They're smaller looking as most of the cell is in the existing cell. In other words, they draw it back up behind so you can't see. And that has problems for us beekeepers because when you're cutting out queen cells and you're shaking off the bees to reveal the brood frames before you put queens in, you've got to be absolutely sure you get every single one, because if there's just one, they'll kill your nice mated queen. Cells need to be caged or cut out, and harvesting of this is very, very difficult because you basically can't access the queens. And they often hatch at different times. So there's a picture of the emergency response. These are the little stubby cells I'm on about. They're the ones that numerous times I've missed over the years, and they've killed my queen. But this is the emergency response. This is what bees do in an emergency when they've got no queen. They can make a queen themselves, but this is how they do it. And when you see this, you know, right, you open that hive just for an inspection, and you go, oh, great. Emergency cells, the queen's gone. And you know she's not there, she's just disappeared. Okay, there's some mini plus mating nucs we'll use. And obviously we've harvested the queen, come back a few days later to put a new one in. We usually put them in the day after. And in this case, they've already drawn up emergency cells. So we'll knock those off before putting the queen in. The second natural way bees produce queens, supersedure. The bees think there's something wrong with the queen. And people have mimicked this. They've pulled off an antenna or clipped her leg, or they've even clipped her wing too hard when they're trying to just reduce her from flying if she swarms. So wing clipping sometimes does have that problem, but I say sometimes seen in package bees. What happens is you get your bees and they arrive in a package with a queen, you put it all in a box, they start to build fine, but there's no nurse bees built. From the minute that queen arrives, she's had already probably 4 or 5 days in transit. And then she arrives, you put her in the box, she's not going to produce any nurse bees, even if she lays on day 5 or day 6, she's not going to produce any nurse bees for 21 days after. And sometimes the bees go, well, what's gone wrong? There must be something wrong with the queen. Let's supersede her. So what you need to do in package bees is you put in a frame of brood about the 2nd week into the process of the queen starting to lay. And that gives some nurse bees. And that's what I'm going to talk about after, is how important nurse bees are in this process. So they draw up as usually as a single cell, mid to upper part of the frame. Typically, the cell is allowed to hatch, but still present. The existing queen is still there. We call her the underperforming queen because she may be not doing what she's supposed to be doing. She may be getting old, and that's why they're superseding her. But it's a really good way, because what it does is it means that that emerging queen will go off and mate while the other queen is still there, and then the bees will kill the old queen and the new one takes over. And it's like almost like a faultless process. And it's perfect for the bees. It's one of the best processes because they replace their queen with no interruption to that supply of eggs being deposited into cells. But however, this method does not produce viable amounts of cells that can be utilized by the beekeeper. So it's a no-starter for us, but it typifies another method they use, which shows us. There's your supersedure cell. That's what you see. You can see you've got larvae there that are much older. They can't make any more. On to the third way. So this is the swarming impulse, the one we've all seen where bees in a prolific colony are running out of space. They have a huge amount of natural resources coming into the colony. The queen feels it's time to swarm. She oversees the production of swarm cells, and they're usually found in the lower part of the frames. Largest type of cell, purpose-built, and are packed full of resources, raw jelly. Everything you need in those cells are perfect. How many times have you knocked off a queen cell and you realize, wow, why is there so much food in that cell? Because the queen instigated it and the bees have made it perfect for that maximum amount of jelly. So the cells can be harvested if the beekeeper, again, gives timely intervention, but this probably gives the most amount of cells in the colony, but still remains difficult to harvest these queens. So you never know really when they're going to swarm. You can't harvest the swarms cells. You can't be sure when they're going to be ready. So it's not a practical way. So none of the three methods the bees use to raise queens produces enough queens in any quantity. None of them produce enough queens in quantity we need. In a way, we can easily use them. However, by the combination of the swarming impulse and the emergency response, we can get good results and very usable cells. So there we go. We have the swarming impulse, and then we have the emergency response. But what I should have had is the picture of those cells again, because this is the swarm that's happened. We don't really want that, but it just shows you how we combine the two. And how we do it is with a cell builder. And I like to quote this: you can raise a few good queens from less than ideal stock under ideal conditions, rather than trying to raise the ideal selected stock under poor conditions. And that's obviously Mike Palmer. He absolutely nailed that. And it's one of the quotes I like to use very often because it just shows what you can do with your own stock at home. You don't have to have the best genetics. You don't have to have the best amount, as long as they're well raised and well fed during the process. You can have good queens at the end of it. So this is what it's like. This is what it's all about. I like to show this picture because look in here. That's all the raw jelly, and it is all in the jelly. Those bees have been those larvae have been fed right up to the moment the cell was capped, and there is still food in them. What happens if for instance, if I hatch them in the incubator, I get queens that go back into the cell and they eat what's left there. I don't know whether they do that in the wild. They're probably fed by bees when they emerge in the colony. But for me, I like to make sure that they've had the maximum amount of food at that time they were made, at the time they were growing and then metamorphosizing into young virgin queens. So how do you get this? Introducing the cell builder. An already strong colony, given 10 frames of brood, combines the swarming impulse with the emergency response. It's so overwhelmingly full of well-fed nurse bees that all they want to do is swarm. You artificially swarm this and remove any chances of the bees making a new queen because they cannot make a new one. You don't give them that opportunity. You create a huge, hopelessly queenless colony. So what is a hopelessly queenless colony? It's a colony of bees that has lost its queen, its eggs, and its larvae, and has nothing to make a new queen from. So we see this sometimes. We go into a colony and we see bees that have become laying workers because there's no way they can carry on that process, no way there's any larvae that are old enough, so they start laying themselves. The female workers become, they're infertile, but they start laying eggs, and that's an example of what happens when you have a queenless colony that isn't rectified in time. But that is what we want to create. So let's have a look at the cycle and help us understand what we're supposed to be doing and when. So I've asked a really good friend if I could use this chart here. So basically, the light green is everything that happens in the colony, in the breeder hive. The main green is what happens when you're in your cell builder, and the yellow is what happens in your nucs and wherever you decide to hatch your queens out. Okay, so it's just very brief, very simple. You start with your eggs hatching into larvae. You graft on day 4, and then you put your larvae that you've grafted into your builder, and that is we say 10 days. So we have a 10-day window we work to, and we try and remove our cells on day 12, day 13, and we get them out of the builder into the mating nuc around that time. Some people do it sooner, some people do it later. And then you're looking at the cells hatching day 16, which is day 12, 13 of, 13, 14 of the whole process, but we work on individual times once they're in the starter, in the grafting stage, and in the nucs after. So it gives us time, and we have to know. We have to be absolutely sure we know what's happening and when. Otherwise, we will miss queens or hatch out too early, or we'll make a mistake. So this is the cell builder parts. I'll start at the top. I have a super on sometimes, but usually it's a feeding shell, so I can feed the bees whilst they're in the box here, because we've got 2 huge brood boxes full of bees here. The brood box contains the added brood. This is a honey super. I put it on if we have a flow, and it helps get the bottom hive congested. So you need to give everything space if they need it. You've got to know your flows. So setting up the initial cell builder, 10 days before we think we want to graft, we select an already strong colony and check it for queen cells. And why do we check it for queen cells? Because you can't have a cell in a cell builder. I'll probably say that 5 times. Above a queen excluder, we add 10 frames of brood harvested from adjacent nucleus colonies, brood factories, and we make a note of the time we harvest that brood, and we put that brood in. And the bees very quickly come up from below, and they surround that brood, keeping it warm as if it was their own, because they know no different. So there's a queen excluder. I've got a box you just saw. It's a double box, and this is the brood I'm adding here. So here we are, 10 days later, day 1 of the grafting day. This is when it gets interesting, when you have a lot of work to do, but it's actually a very quick process, and you've done it a few times. It's like, okay, let's get this done. So all the brood that was in the top box we added has hatched, and guess what? There's a queen excluder here, as I just showed you. So the queen hasn't come up from underneath and laid in there at all. So this box has just got hatched brood and open cells that are probably being backfilled with some honey, which is fine, with nectar, which is fine. But it's just to show you that, okay? So that's day 1. This is where we make the colony hopelessly queenless. We remove the top box from its position.
The website is.
We remove the top box from its position, and we move it away temporarily. We just take the whole thing off, and it's full of bees. We move it away to the side. There it is. I've just moved it away. And here we have the queen right section. And there's the queen excluder still in place. So all the bees are still flying, coming and going here. That's what they do. That's the place they know. So then I move this section away. I rotate it 180 degrees, taking the queen away from that position. So there is me moving the box away. And there is the box now away from where the bees know. So the bees leaving here, that's the front now. I've rotated it and rotated 180 degrees and moved it away. So the bees don't know anything. When they come out there, they just fly back to the front here. And guess what? There's nothing there at the moment. So we put a new base down. So there's the new base, and on goes the top box that was originally on top of this part. Okay. There you go. Now we have a hopelessly queenless colony. But is it hopelessly queenless? It may not be, because there may be queen cells in there. And there may be queen cells in there because when you elevate brood and larvae above a queen excluder, often they make queen cells. So you have to check. Okay, and just as I said, underneath, the bees are continually flying back, and a lot of bees are leaving this box and coming back here. It's kind of mayhem for a while. You're starting to make a bit of a disorder in the apiary, and you'll see that, but it soon calms down. So therefore, I've got to check this box for queen cells. You cannot have a queen cell in a cell builder, especially now, because you're going to do the cell building now. So the added brood above an excluder may have had some larvae in, and that's why they may have made a cell. So you have to check. Every one must be removed. You've got to shake all the bees off. So I've done all that. The underneath box is now completely empty of queen cells. Sometimes there's some, sometimes there's not many, sometimes there's none at all, which is great, but you always have to check. So this is a shaker box. Around the top, we've got duct tape. Now, as Mike Palmer that taught me about this, bees generally don't like duct tape. You put a band of it around the top, a double band, and the bees you shake into here don't generally crawl up over the top of the duct tape, and they all have to go down. Now, why am I shaking bees into this? Because the cell builder, the whole complete cell builder when it was together, was so full of nurse bees, but a lot of them I've transferred to the box that's behind now that contains the queen. But I don't need all those bees there. I need them here. I need them in the main section. So I'll shake them in. And that's what I do. I go through the whole box and I shake out some of the nurse bees in through the excluder. And I shake them through the excluder because I can't be sure that there's not just one queen. There might be two queens in that box. Because if I find the one and go, oh, great, I found the queen, but I carry on shaking, what if there's a second queen? She goes in and she kills all your cells. That's what you have to do. So there's me shaking extra bees in from the top section, which is now, as I said, the far side. But I always leave enough bees and brood in this, well, bees to cover the brood that's in that box. And then that means that the queen, there's no chance she'll swarm because she's lost all her support staff. There's just enough to keep her going. So all the forager bees are virtually gone, and there'll be a massively reduced amount of nurse bees. And where are they now? They're all in here. They're all in this main box that is hopelessly queenless. There's the queen. She turns up amongst the queen excluder. She's lost a marking for this one, but I usually make sure they're marked explicitly because it helps you find them. But she can't get her head down. She's trying to get back down into the colony, and most of the bees just crawl through the grill and straight in the bottom box. That is what you end up with. This is the cell builder, how it should be, set up, hopelessly queenless. They've got no larvae left to make any new queen with, okay? Thousands of nurse bees. And this is what you have when you set that up. I hope you can see that. You need to have your box overflowing with bees. This is completely normal. They won't go anywhere. They won't follow off. Why? Because they don't know any different. They only know that place. And most of them are nurse bees. Well, I wouldn't say most of them. If you look at the percentages, I don't know exactly, but there's a lot of forager bees, but there's obviously a massively greater percentage of nurse bees that can't fly or won't fly. And you've just put them back in and you put them there and they stay there. So pollen frame, you add next. Where do you get your pollen frame from? Queenless colonies in your apiary. Strong worker colonies you find during the inspection, or you make one. You trap some pollen and you rub the pollen into the frame. And you harvest it like that and rub it in with your hands, or you use one like this. This is ideal. I would like actually more pollen than that, but it's enough because there's also honey here. So it's a good pollen frame with provisions. This one here is even better. This is from the chestnut flow, and there's only a little bit of brood in the middle, but the rest is pollen. And this is both sides. And by the end of the chestnut flow, we generally have frames like this in a lot of the colonies. So when you're making your last batch of queens, you always have plenty of pollen for what you need. I very rarely do this. This is Ultra Bee. I rub it into an open cone, or I trap some pollen myself. But recently I've been using Ultra Bee as a supplement when I'm cell building, and I recommend we do that all the time now. So breeder queens, I'm not going to go into much about this, but we should be selecting for docility, disease resistance, chalk brood. You never breed from a chalk brood queen. Otherwise, you'll see it in all your nucs and everything after. Okay. VHS, mite counts throughout the previous year, if you're into that. Overwintering cluster size. Are the bees tiny that they take so long to build up in the spring? Will they give you spring honey? Honey crop versus post-harvest feeding. Do you have to feed your bees a heck of a lot and they've only given you, well, they might have given you, say, 40 kilos of honey for that summer flow, but did you have to feed them 30 kilos back? Whereas, did you have colonies that gave you 30 kilos, but you didn't have to feed them at all? That's what you got to think about. Swarming, swarminess, you can work on that. Hygienicness, there's endless traits we can look for, but you end up, the biggest one most people go for is hygienicness and docility, because we all want nice bees. We all don't want to have to take out, I think the expression goes, do you really want bees that staple your socks to your ankles? Because I certainly don't. So buy yourself some quality genetics, spend a few pounds, get yourself a decent breeder queen. These are 2 queens from the Marken Isles. And what you're doing by doing this is you're buying someone else's work at a fraction of the value it really is. There's no, I can't really put a value on breeder queens, because when you get one that has had someone else spending years crossing them and selecting and culling and choosing, you are getting that already done. So you're buying yourself some work. So if you want to start off and you haven't got any good stock, buy yourself a couple of breeder queens. These 2 are island mated, which means the lines have been controlled. It doesn't mean that you're going to write all the numbers down and you can do all that. It doesn't. What I'm saying is you're already getting 50% of the genetics that are a good line. Don't forget, when you make daughters, you're only getting 50% of the daughter arriving in that new virgin queen. When she goes off and mates, she'll get 50% of all the drones that are flying around. But you will profit a lot by just doing a few basic things. And if you get some good genetics, you will win hands down long term. So this is me grafting. The cell builder is ready. I'm grafting a larvae that's between 12 and 24 hours old. And ideally, I like to leave my cell builder for, say, 5-6 hours after I've made it up. And that means that all those nurse bees getting more and more agitated because they haven't got any larvae in that box. You're almost forcing them to sweat, and you can almost see them in the apiary. They're circling around, they're kind of crying out. They're just not happy. They're really agitated. And what I tend to do is I'll set up in the morning. If the weather's good, I'll go off and do an afternoon's work in the apiaries and come back and I'll graft of an evening, because it takes me about an hour to get the frame out of the box, do the grafts and get them back in the cell builder. And it's really good to do at the end of the day for me. So that's me grafting. Obviously, I chose a huge larvae here so you could see it. But we obviously make jokes about that amongst the beekeeping world about, do you want a ladle for that one? That's huge. You should be getting smaller. Obviously, you want nice small larvae that are just hatched. And they do say if you can see the larvae, it's too big. That's what you should be doing when you're grafting. But I do encourage people to graft. It's the best way to quickly get larvae into cups for making queens. There's our larvae in the bottom. So she sit on a puddle of raw jelly. Do I pre-fill my cups? Do I add a squirt of sterile water? Do I do anything like that? Do I put them in the colony the day before so that they can polish out the cells? No, I don't. I just graft straight in, because it's all about setting up the cell builder correctly, because if you get it right, they'll jump on those larvae and they'll fill that larvae full of raw jelly straight away. So this is the frame configuration when I graft. I've got a pollen frame here. I've got grafted larvae in that frame there, and I've got pollen in this one. I like to have a sandwich. I like my larvae to be sandwiched between 2 frames. So the nurse bees, and then I push the frames together so that the nurse bees can actually they don't have to go far to get the feed they need. And don't forget, it's so full of nurse bees as well. There all must be competition going, I want to feed her. No, I want to feed her. I want to feed her. That's what you want. You want to give those larvae every opportunity to be fed as well as they possibly can. That's what I do to I had carcellations in my brood boxes. So I angle grind the carcellations off so I can slide the frames together. Just a little practical thing you can do. So you must feed your cell builder. And it sounds ridiculous, but what if there's a flow? Of course. If there's a flow and you still need to feed it, because what if it rains? What do they do at night? They don't stop building queen cells at night. You just need to give them that carbohydrate to keep them going. You've given them everything else. So here I have a normal frame cover, well, sorry, crown board that's inverted. So there's a gap underneath here of a gap of about 15 mil. And that means I can put on pollen sub underneath here as well. And then I put the feeder on, but I do close off the feeder and just allow a passage that can get, say, 3 to 5 bees going through it all the time. I don't want to give them loads of feed. I just want to mimic a flow. So I want the colony to feel there's nectar coming in. So you're giving them that feeling that everything's good as well. They've got food. Oh, we've got larvae. We'll have to work on these ones, but let's raise this larvae, what we've been given. They have no choice, but they will. And if you put everything right around it, they only can concentrate on your larvae. That's what it's all about. So this is actually day 2 after grafting, because I remember I took this video because it was raining the previous day, so I couldn't take these out 24 hours after. But this is what you get. You get good acceptance. There was 4 bars of 14. That's 56 grafts, and I got 52 out the 56. So that's pretty good. These are then transferred into finishers, which I'll talk about now. So 24 hours later, or 48, or whenever you want to take them out, you can. You could leave them all in there, but I'll explain about that in a moment. But you've got this box, and it's a box primed to draw larvae up, and that's what you must use it for. So what I do here is I take the cells out of the box, and then you'll see here that some are accepted and some aren't, but the majority are accepted. This is when I do a double frame, so I do 14 times 4 times 2. I do grafting 112 grafts sometimes, but I need a load of queens in the spring. And that means I get a massive take, but then I must take the cells out quickly, otherwise they'll start to reduce them down naturally. But this is what I do. I go through and I take out these ones that are not accepted. So they were started, but they've reduced the number down already, and they've taken out some of the cells. So I just take these away and I gap up. And while I'm doing that, I put the frames on top of the builder, on their side, always keeping them to the side or vertically down, because then that means that you don't disturb the larvae inside. And this warmth from the colony keeps the larvae nice and warm. They even feed them while they even feed the larvae while I've got the frames like that. And then what I do is I prepare my finishers. I go to my finishers, open them up. I just put a small cover back on, because I know then how many finishers I'm going to need and what I'm going to need to do and where I'm going to need to put my queen cells. So I know I can move these efficiently and quickly and keeping them warm. And this is where I put them. This is a finisher. I slide the frames apart and I carefully insert the started cells. Keep the cells warm, work in calm weather and away from the wind. It really is critical. If you need to have a little box just to lie the cells on their side, just to keep them out of the wind, that's important, because you do not want to chill your larvae. These are my finishers. And these are the boxes I use. They are a 5/5 configuration, technically a 10 frame hive. There's no 10 frames hives here, but it's the same thing, but they're vertically done. So 5 frames at the bottom, 5 frames at the top. And I have to manage these. I have to move brood from the bottom to the top, because I want some nice open larvae where I put my cells to be finished. But the queen is underneath. There's a queen excluder there, so she cannot come up and tear the cells down. That's what a finisher is. So the benefits of using finishers. Finishers finish your started cells. Less cells per strong colony, meaning each cell has maximum attention by the nurse bees, giving maximum nutrition. If you did not remove a high number of started cells from a starter, the bees would naturally reduce their numbers down. And to what level they would reduce them to, if you had a full box of bees, you'd probably end up with about 30 to 40 cells. It depends. It depends on the bee's type, but generally 30 to 40, they'll be left at the end. Okay. Also, the remaining cells may not be fed to the maximum. So if you've got just 40 cells because you left it all alone after you've grafted, some of those won't be fed that well. They'll be all okay, but they just might be not good queens. Remember, I want every queen to be 100% as good as she could be. You free up your starter, because you take the cells out and you can put another load in straight away. This hopelessly queenless setup will run for 4 or 5 days, 4 or 5 loads of cells running through. And you can even run more through that. If you take them out after 6 hours, you can do that. It all depends on what you want to do. Once you learn the skill, the craft, you can then use it to do as many queens as you want within reason. So you can reduce, and the main thing I like about all this is you reduce the risk of a road virgin entering a hopelessly queenless setup and killing or developing cells by using a finisher. You may otherwise not know that they have destroyed until day 5 or day 10, whichever you decide to look at your cells. If you put them into finishers, your cells are as good as protected. The bees will not kill or tear down the cells. Well, it's the queen that does it, but she will not do it because there's no queen in that box. Your finishers can be your brood factories. It's easy, 5 over 5. You just go and regularly check them and harvest brood, keep them balanced, learn how to control that colony. Some finishers differ, some are better than others, and I'll show you some pictures coming up of different cells, the same cells, but different finishers. Do I need to use a finisher? It entirely depends on your own requirements. There is no reason to have a finisher if you're only wanting to produce, say, 10 or 20 cells. You leave them in the box, your starter box, and then when they're capped over, or as soon as they're accepted, you can put them above the queen excluder, reassemble the colony, and the queen cannot get up and tear them down. They're as though they are supersedure cells in the supers. It's no different. They will be finished by the bees, and they're in an excluded part of the colony. Personally, I like to raise a lot of queens, as I said, over a short period of time, and having a well set up starter means you can push through daily at least 50 cells, maybe 100 a day if you really wanted to. I do 50 a day, so I have enough, because if I use too many at once, I've got to sort too many at once at the end, and it makes even more work. So it's all about doing a protocol that works for you. So started cells on the cell bar sit between the frames of brood, and they sit between the nectar stores. And I've moved open brood up to here to make sure that this attracts nurse bees. Because if you put open brood next to your cells, it brings up the nurse bees from the bottom of the colony, and they're around your cells again, same as the starter. But don't forget, this is a running colony. It's just the queen can't get up and tear your cells down. You need to manage your finishers like any other colony. There we go, harvested cells. They're not that huge, but they're fine. There's nothing wrong with those at all. Looks like they're pretty full of raw jelly, and you can see they were just between this frame here. There's the example of what you get from the same genetics grafted in different finishers. Some finish them well. You get to know your finishers. You get to know what works for you. Majority of the times, 90% of the time, every finisher works fine. But this is just to highlight, sometimes the finishers work a little bit differently. One of the most questions I get asked is, how do I make queens with limited resources? So how can you raise a few queens? So you want to make just a few cells. How can you do this with limited resources? So here we have a standard 10-frame Dadant box. This might be your British National. You might have a double brood British National. You might have a Langstroth Deep. This is what you can do. This is kind of something I've worked on a bit because I've used finishers for so long. It's just so easy to do this. So introducing the 5 over 5 cell builder. You take a normal 10-frame colony, whatever you can akin to that, but roughly 10 frames on the point of swarming. In other words, it's a really strong colony. It doesn't mean you can see queen cells in it. It just means it could do, because it's really good, really strong spring colony into the summer. The colony is converted to a 5 over 5. You arrange the brood vertically from the center out, and the honey on the furthest from the center. And you put the queen above the excluder. She's in the top of the box, so she cannot abscond. Okay, she's in there. You make sure you give her room. If you haven't got any frames of comb, you just put some foundation in so she's got room to lay. You've got to just look after her a bit, but she's in that top box. You leave at least 2 frames for her, and you leave this for 5 days like that. Okay. And in the bottom, all the brood that was in there or the open eggs and larvae that you put in, that will have aged. That will have lost its ability to be changed or to be made into a queen if it became hopelessly queenless. So that's what you're going to do. You're doing the reverse of the same thing we did with the bigger box, but what you're creating, this part, this lower section, is now not able to raise its own colony, but they don't know that yet because there's still technically one. There's the queen excluder, the bees are coming and going from the front, and they are going up and down, but the queen's up here. No big deal, no change, nothing. But what we do is this: we then take the top box off and we move it to one side, but we just move it away. And all the bees that are flying will fly back to this one because that's all they know. okay? But there will be a lot of nurse bees here, so you need to shake more nurse bees in, and you leave just enough bees in the box that's been turned away, just to keep the queen going and keep her there. But she's away now. So what is this colony? This colony is now hopelessly queenless, and in it, there's no eggs and larvae for them to make a new queen. And this is how you can make a small amount of cells in this box, because it's going to go into emergency mode. It's going to draw up whatever they can find, but they can't draw up anything. So you give them some grafts. You are now ready to use this cell cut method, or whatever works for you, as I say, graft or cell cut method. So as I said, the flying bees all return to the original high position. They'll bring in resources. You place your grafts, like we do in the finishers, on the top, between the top middle bars. Or if you wish, you can use a whole cell bar, but it uses too much space up. You're better off just parting the top frames and just dropping your grafts in and sandwiching them in the top, okay? Use a pollen frame that was in that colony. If not, find one from another colony, and then you'll have pollen for those bees to build up a few larvae. Always put a feeder on and some pollen sub if you have it. Check the cells after 24 hours and leave them grow. And then if you want to, you can reunite the whole box. I make a T support on top of my bars, and a friend of mine has made some really nice, Colin, if you're out there, thank you, made some really nice little metal T pieces that sit on top of my bars that stop the bar falling through. It's very simple. It's like, not rocket science, but it works really well. So you can confidently just rest the bar between the frames, and that is ready to go. They'll build on that. So reassembling the colony. Providing the cells are started, you can reassemble the colony anytime between day 2 and day 5, because then they'll be kept over on day 5. This time, the queen must not have access to the cells as before, but she must be at the other side of the excluder. So what I like to put, out of preference, I like to put my queen underneath this time and have the cells in the top box, because it just makes it easier to access them, to take them out, because you haven't got to take the whole box off. So this now is the same as one of my finishers. You have the queen in the bottom has room to lay. She's now got more resources again. She won't swarm because she's been in confinement for a while. That kind of took that energy out of her. She's not going to want to swarm. And now you can just leave the colony and let your cells finish. And on day 10, you can take them out or cage them if you want in that top box. You can just put some cages over the cell cups, which is why the Nico stuff's good. You can do it with the Manlake cups as well. It's up to you, but the Nico works really well for me. That's the T-bar I was on about. We just use something simple, really, really simple, and it stops the bars falling through. And this can also fit into my cell, into my grafting bar holder, and there's my grafting frame. There we go, harvesting the cells. That's what you want to see. This is from one of my finishers, and you might have seen that clip before at the end of some of my YouTube videos. Pretty simple stuff as far as I'm concerned, but it's just a protocol you learn. But you just have to learn to be a bit dynamic as you do it. There's the pollen sub I'm on about. I now put that on all my cell builders. Sometimes we get a few that aren't taken in the finishers, but that's just the bees for you. They do different things. Now, when I'm doing my big cell builder, I generally move my capped and nearly mature cells to my incubator, on about day 10. But I've learned in the past that if I move them earlier, there can be issues with knocking them. So you have to be really careful. And when you're dealing with 100 cells, it's not that easy to get them all off the frame quickly and keep them warm and not get them knocked. It's always a juggling act, So as I said, you can use them. You can keep them in the colony, and they must be above an excluder. But you're better off caging them after day 10, just in case they start hatching on day 11, day 12, which is when they will. So this is also the other reason why I just was stumbling there. The other reason why I also remove my cells from the finisher is because often my finishers are full. I need to free them up because the next load of cells is coming from the starter. So you need to kind of keep it moving, and it's a kind of continuous train that goes. So what can you do with your queen cells? Here we go, straightforward stuff. You can use them in splits. You can prepare them 5 days before if you want, and cut out the queen cells, and then put your put your virgin cells in. Or I tend to now allow my queens to hatch out in the incubator, That's just my personal preference. And then I like to introduce them directly into the colony or into a cage they're released during the night. You can make up mating nukes, the mini plus, for example, flexible small colonies designed to allow for increase and further division. Or you can sell your virgin queens, it's up to you. This is my colleague Christy on the mating station. This is late summer. We're just checking some of the mini plus here, all populated, all nice. We usually get about 3 to 4 queens through the process because the season is so short. It's a continuous process, and it's hard work because you want to push as many queens through because you want obviously to have as many queens made with the resources you've got. So we build our mini plus on top of 6 frame colonies in the spring. There's our overwintered nukes, and on top of that we put this box that we can build the frames on, and then we split them down and we build new little colonies that take our new queens when we're ready. And there's, for example, this is what we do. This is me with all the mini nukes we made in one afternoon. We went to an apiary, we broke all the boxes down and got them here, and these have queen cells put in that will hatch the following day. So they're usually confined one night. We put them all out the next day. There's the cell we've introduced. We put a little gap between, a little circle between each mini plus frame to allow the cell to sit in. So it's perfect. You just whip the top off, whip the plastic cover back, drop the cell in, and she hatches out. The whole idea is if you know exactly when your queen's going to hatch, you can hold them up to the light without damaging them right at the last minute and see if they're wriggling around. Then you pop them in and then they're done. Then they hatch out and everything's accepted. This is just more mating boxes we have at our workshop at the back. That's what we like to see. Nice frames of evenly laid eggs, and that indicates a queen that is really ready to keep laying. So she's just become fertilized. Look at the pattern of the eggs, all nice. That's what I like to see. Every cell is filled to the right there. And then eventually you see this. That's even better. These larvae are almost at the point of being capped over. Beautiful pearly white larvae. When we see this, we really are at the point we can harvest that queen because we know she's laying really well. There's absolutely no point in not harvesting her. You have to be, sometimes you have to push things a little bit to get the next lot in. It's so short the season. That's what we like to see. Beautiful laying patterns. Really, really nice brood. If it was all like that, I'd be a happy man, but unfortunately it never is always like that. It's just, sometimes you get, really good runs. It's up and down. Mini plus mating nukes ready to be overwintered. So these queens we can use. You can sell them in the following spring. You can let them build up again in the spring, and then break them down again and make more mini plus with them. Or you can put them on top of a box and allow them to grow into a nuke, or you can shake them out into a nuke, that kind of thing. There's so many things you can do with mini plus. This is at the end of the season. I'm doing the last lot of nukes. This is my shed down the bottom of my garden at home, and I'm dragged all the nukes out, getting them ready of an evening so I can take these out the next day and fill these up with bees because we've done our honey harvest, and I'm off to make up some nukes. So making splits from clearer boards. So we leave the clearer boards on when they've gone down and the honey and the bees have disappeared through that one-way valve. You can just see the lozenge there on the clearer board. But when you lift up the clearer board, often there's absolutely thousands of bees and nurse bees underneath the cover roof. So all you do is knock them off into a nuke, put 2 frames of brood in, and you've got a nuke, and you take it away and give it a queen. It is as simple as that. These are nukes I made up of that are back at the mating station. All be unloaded and queens put in. Feeding. Cell builder must be fed regardless of the flow. We feed little to give the colony the feeling the nectar is still coming in. What if it rains? I covered this in the section, but I want to reiterate it. Even your nukes must be fed. When you make your nukes, you have to feed them because you do not want a queen being born into a colony that's starving. She needs every chance possible. And that's another thing you can do, because don't forget, producing the queens is one thing, getting them mating is another. There's our syrup we get once a year. We have a group purchase from a lot of beekeepers. This is the top of my 5/5s, and this is what we made last week. We made some feeders where we can put pollen sub in this. You can see it's the end of the pollen sub, and we put liquid feed in this side. Okay, so it means we can feed liquid feed and pollen sub in the same feeder. It really works well, but just for the summer, not very good for overwintering. So how can you help your queens to get better mated? There's a few things you can do. You can augment your drone comb, so augment your drone population by adding extra drone comb. Don't forget, in most of our colonies these days, we tend to have non-drone foundation, and it's just worker brood. So we tend to forget that. And what you can do here, what we did here was there's one method you can do, and it's a well-known method. You literally find a brood frame, you cut the underneath off, okay, and you put it in space 3 or 4. Probably 2 or 3, and they will build drone into that area. They've rebuilt some worker comb here where we cut it off, but they have built drone into that. So it shows you what you can do, or you can just buy some drone comb like I do, put that into your colony in the right place, and you have to move it around after. But there you go. That's where you get lovely frames of drone. This is almost too much. You have to be careful. 1, because of the varroa issue, and 2, because you are putting a lot of drones with this into another colony. So you have to feed a drone colony, you have to give it protein to keep it strong, but it works and you have wonderful drones. All you got to do is give an oxalic acid treatment if you're worried about mites every now and again, just to keep the mite numbers down, because obviously a lot of mites will have gone into that from the donor colony. So you can add drone to your best stocks 40 days before you think you will have virgin queens on their mating flights. You move all your best stocks with the most desirable drones near your mating station. And I don't mean right next to, I mean like a kilometre away. There's been some work done on the best place. I can't remember the exact figures, but you don't want to put your best stocks in your mating station. You want to have them surrounding it. And you move your worst stocks away, and it's just logical to do that because you do not want those drones flying around your mating queens. But I will say one thing that we do find personally, that a lot of our queens do mate very close to our mating station. That's what we think, because they're in and out and back very quickly. Work with your nearest beekeeper friends. Offer to requeen some of their worst stocks with your good queens. It's really hard work, but it's a really good thing if you can do it, because you get good relations with other beekeepers, and you've got that peace of mind thinking, well, at least they're my drones flying around, not the rubbish they had. Feed your drone colonies, as I just said, syrup and pollen sub. And if you want to, make them queenless nearer the end of the summer, because queenless colonies do not bin out the drones, and they will look after the drones better because they're considered part of the colony, where the queen, when she's present, seems to kind of reduce the number. We don't know why or how, but I find when I have queen-right colonies full of drones, they seem to get weaker. So I take the queen away and make a nuke with that colony, and then leave the drones in it if I really want those drones in that area. So when you're introducing your queens that you've mated and put into your, so that you've put into your mini plus or whatever boxes you need, and you want to transfer that queen to a production hive, you want to really use a pushing cage, because all the work you've done to arrive at this process, you don't want the queen to be killed, because some of the bees we have here are first and second crosses, so they can be a little bit aggressive sometimes. So you put her under pushing cage on some open brood, sorry, on some brood that's about to hatch. The brood hatches around the bees. They only know the queen. Those nurse bees under that cage only know that queen, and they start feeding her, as nurse bees do, and she comes back into lay, and then the condition of the queen changes. She becomes a laying queen underneath this cage, okay? And then because she's a laying queen, she starts the pheromone stuff, and then the pheromones from the inside are passed to the outside through the bees from the inside, and everything starts to work. She becomes accepted in the colony, but she can't get out. But look here, what's this? This is a queen cell. This is what you must check for. Why do we have a queen cell? The same reason, really, we had a queen cell in the cell builder above the excluder, because there was no pheromone from the queen, and the queen wasn't able to tear the cell down. It's the same type of thing. So you must look before you release the queen cage. The chances are she'd probably tear this down anyway when she gets out, but you don't want to get to risk it, because if that hatches, a virgin will always probably kill, I say always probably, it doesn't make sense, but she, in most likely conditions, she will kill your nice mated queen. So you just go and knock off the queen cells before you release the queen, and there you go. You release the queen, and off she goes. There's eggs in these cells she's been laying. The bees underneath have accepted her, so the ones on the outside, off she goes. Really good method that I like to use. And it takes the stress out of it. You don't dread going to see the colonies, because sometimes you can have bad results. Nukes to overwinter. This was an apiary I used to use at a client's house. Unfortunately, that's one of the things that's happened to me, is because I've now stopped working for clients. I only do bees. I've actually lost a few apiaries, but that's the way it is. This is actually a really good apiary right in the valley. So what can go wrong with the cell builder? Just a few points to help you. A mated or virgin queen gets into your hopelessly queenless setup, which I talked about before when I was talking about finishers, and you can lose all your cells in 24 hours. But that's why finishers are safer. But at least you know if you check. If you check straight after, 24 hours after you've done your grafts, if the bees are still drawing them out, you know that colony is queenless and they'll continue to finish them. You missed a queen on the frame and it hatches out, or she flew. Sometimes they can fly, and she does go back into the front of the hive, believe you me. She finds her way because she just homes in on the scent. And then you look at her, go back in, you see her flying around the apiary, and she goes bang, straight back in the front. You're like, okay, but you know she's gone in. All you have to do is shake the brood frames off again, and usually she turns up in the shaker box. This is what happens sometimes. A cell from the grafts I do falls off and gets wedged underneath downstairs in the brood nest, which obviously is the hopelessly queenless brood nest, and they build wherever it falls. So you have to watch this. You might not see it, but that's why you have to count the cells into the box and count them out, really. And then you know if there's one missing. Because if this hatched out, this is a cell in a cell builder, and you cannot have a cell in a cell builder. Because when that hatches out, third batch down, it'll kill all your queens and stop them raising anymore. If you don't see the queen when preparing the cell builder, try and find her. Go through it again. If necessary, shake the whole colony back through the shaker box. And I've done this many times, and you leave nothing to chance. This is what I like to see. At the end of the day, when you get a frame like this, this is a Daydonk frame. All around is nice bees. All around here is full of provisions, nice diversity in pollens, full of nectar. And what do we have in the middle? Glistening white larvae. That's what you want. That's a queen that's gone off and mated, come back, and she's laying like Billy-O. That's the end result. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
That's great. That's great. Shall we stop sharing? Yeah. Hi. Hello, everyone. Wow. Just to let you all know that I don't rear queens, so these questions are going to be quite challenging for some of them. So lots of questions. That was wonderful, Richard. Thank you. How are you feeling? How do you feel? How are you feeling?
Good. Yeah, good. A bit dry-throated, but
okay. Okay. So
there was a lot to get through, and I know there'll be questions, and I'll do my best to answer every single one, no matter how long it takes. So fire away. That's what I do. It's not ideal, but it's ideal for me, and I'm tweaking it all the time. Just bear that in mind. You know, it's a movable thing. We're always changing it. Always with querying. Once you learn about it, you can do different things, but you find something that works for you and you stick to it.
Okay, there's a lot of questions. So
okay, good.
So just to put everybody in the picture, Richard has said he is happy to try and answer all the questions, but I think we may get to a certain point where we have a break, and you know, if people decide they want to go, or people can stay and maybe ask more direct questions. Okay, so the first question is, what is your recommended incubator for queen cells?
Okay, well, the one I've got is a straightforward egg incubator. But what you find is they don't, I can't remember the temperature, but most egg incubators are a little bit cooler. They're set a little bit cooler than what you need for the temperature you need for queen rearing. I think queen rearing is 33 to 34 degrees C, and most of the egg ones are about 28, 29. There's probably chicken rearers out there now. You could tell me straight off. So excuse me if I get it wrong, but whatever I mean is you just have to simply undo the top and just tweak it a bit. But a straightforward egg incubator will do the job. But the one I've got is an Italian one. It was bought in the UK from Banbury Incubators, but it doesn't do them anymore, unfortunately. It stopped selling them. So you need to really look around. It's a problem finding a good incubator. There's an opening for somebody.
Okay.
I think that was a bit of Google Translate in there. It didn't come out quite well.
Well, I have said that you will hang around. So if he wants to go into more detail, I just think.
Okay.
Okay. So from Alan, what would be the number of drone colonies for the drones to be in the air per breeder queen hive?
Good question. I should know this, but I would say your natural colonies will produce drones anyway. I don't have the figures, but I would say I would get at least 6 drone colonies running in my mating station or around my mating station with augmented drone. I don't, as I said, I don't know the figures, but it's something I should be looking at. But I always seem to do pretty well. I always run with sort of 5 and 6 with added drones in them. Okay. But you have to be careful. You can't overdo the drones because you've got to look after the colony as well.
Okay. So obviously everyone's very interested in where you get your breeder queens from. They asked if you could give the details and approximately how much they might cost. Yeah,
okay, breeder queens, if they're what we call island mated, in other words, the drones are taken to an island and so are the virgin queens. You're looking at anything between 130, sometimes they're cheaper, around 100, but most of the time from reputable people, it's been 130 and about 160 euros per queen. Okay, but if you're buying a few, you can get a little bit off. I buy queens from Buckfast, Netherlands. I buy them from Dr. Peter Stoffen in Germany. I can't remember offhand. I've had some from a French breeder called Duguay, and his now his son's taken over the business. You just need to either contact me and I'll give you the links if you want, or I can put them up on my YouTube channel. I've done a video on breeder queens on my YouTube channel. If you log onto that, you'll find I've done some links to the breeder queen suppliers. But you really need to reserve your queens like yesterday, because this time of year, everyone's going, oh, better get a couple of queens, and there's not many left. So you really have to get ahead of the game. Okay. So Sophie says, how do you graft the larvae into the cell bar? Okay, I use a Chinese grafting tool. I've got a video on this, but if you look it up, grafting with on Google it up or something, beekeeping grafting with a Chinese grafting tool, you're basically putting your grafting tool underneath the larvae, you're lifting it up on a puddle of its own raw jelly, and then just laying it back down into the bottom of your cup. And that's what grafting is. You're literally transferring larvae over from one frame to a better receptacle for you to take that to the colony. You could put the frame in. You could just do on-the-spot queen ring. You could nick underneath a cell, and they would build cells in a hopelessly queenless colony. But the problem with that is then you have to cage the queens after while they're about to hatch, and it becomes very tricky. If you graft and you control it, you've got complete control of how that queen hatches, and you can monitor it. Okay. How many queen cells in each finisher? Okay, I run 14 because that's what is on my cell bar, and it just makes it well for me. What I do is sometimes when my finishers has sealed the cells, I don't necessarily harvest them. I leave them in there and I make another gap further over. It gets a bit of a squeeze, but I put the next lot in. So you can have 2 sets of cells in one finisher, but one is capped already. So the bees aren't doing anything but keeping those cells warm. But I do 14. You could, if you have a really, finishers are like colonies. They get really strong and really prolific. I just find myself that 14 cells is a good number because they get a really good amount of care and nutrition by the nurse bees, but not too much. If you know what I mean, the average, so if you put, say, 28 cell 2 bars in, that colony might just not be as strong as you wanted. They might not look after those other cells. The whole idea is the more finishes you have, the more brood you have, the more cell building you can do. You just have to kind of sacrifice at the beginning of the year. You say, right, I'm going to put these 10 nucs to brood factories and finishes at the start. You make more as the season goes on. But once you've designated those colonies, you forget about them and you just use the resources to raise your queens. Okay. So it's that circle, you know. But you can do a few more than that. I think other people do 20, but I like to do 14. Okay. Ricky says, is there an issue with burr comb on cell bars with so many out of work nurse bees? And excellent question. Right, a lot of people have this problem. I was going to insert a frame tonight, not insert a frame, but that's what it's all about. I was going to insert a picture to show you what I do in my cell builder when a flow is running. As well as having the feeder on and the pollen sub on and all these resources coming in through the front door, I add a frame of foundation about 2 frames away from the grass. Because if you don't, you can get burr comb built on everything, and it's a bit of a skill to learn that. What I do also is I push my frames, as I said, really close together, and doing that alone helps a lot against burrcomb. Okay, but if you just put, you saw that picture of me putting cells on the T-bar I showed with the bits of metal that are right angles, 90 degrees, and it stops the bar falling down. If I left that open like that, they would almost certainly build a huge load of comb. But if you close them up together, that also has
sorry, don't worry, carry on.
That also has an effect and stops the comb. But you, if you add comb, don't forget you're aiming at nurse bees that are the youngest bees. So if you can give those wax builders something to do in another area, they will almost be there doing the wax in an area you put them. So you can get them away from the nurse bees. It's just a way of managing a colony. It's quite specific.
Okay.
But it's a really interesting question, because one of the biggest problems people find when they're raising queens is, oh my goodness, when you pull out this raft of comb and then it's entangled in the cells, and oh my God. And often the cells they die because when you take the wax off, it breaks the cell, and it's a real pain.
Okay. Where do you get, everyone wants to know where you get everything from. Where do you get the mini nuke plus equipment from?
Okay, well, we buy ours from our beekeeping suppliers called Apiculture Le Rouge. They're right up near Calais, but they are made by Butte, the same company that makes the 6-frame Dadant nukes. So you could maybe Google that up. It's not as easiest thing to get hold of, but you can buy, I think in the UK, they do, one of the beekeeping companies in the UK do an equivalent with the same size frames. I don't want to quote it. I can't remember the name offhand, but there's one that's the same size frames. It's just a slightly different box. That you can buy in the UK that are made in the UK, so they're supplied to the UK. So, but they are German, basically. They're German poly nukes.
There's 46 questions to come.
Okay, let's have them.
May not be, I may be exaggerating. Somebody's asked how much the syrup costs. I mean, I don't know whether that's per...
Well, I can tell you, we get ours, it varies a bit. I think last year's ours was about 56 cents a kilo. So it's pretty cheap. It's fructose syrup. It comes from Belgium. It's the same lorries that supply beekeepers in the UK. It's made by, it is actually confectioner's grade, so it's sterile. It arrives in a sealed lorry. We have a group purchase where we all turn up with our big IBCs, and then we put it in that. And then the problem occurs when you buy syrup in that quantity. 600 liters actually weighs 900 kilos. So it's really, really heavy stuff. And then you've got to get it back, and you've got to move. Literally, it weighs a ton each IBC. So yeah, it's not expensive, but once you can manage it, it's worth buying in bulk for us, definitely. I use about 3,000 liters a year at the moment.
Okay. So Andrew has said they use ventilated hives and nukes, and should they be ventilated or unventilated during builders and finishers setups? I
would say almost definitely, because if you have a builder that is ventilated at the base, it helps that colony, it helps all the bees be able to be in the box. Okay, the picture I showed you of all the bees out the front after I set it up, most of them, once you put the cells in, most of them go back in. If it's a really warm night, you'll come out and there'll be a huge beard underneath, even when your cells are in. But once they detect that queen, they all go in. And I find personally, if you have a ventilated base, open mesh floor, that helps your grafting, because all they do is just surround it. They just all go in that box. So if you've got an open mesh floor, I would think it's best.
Okay. Someone has said, even though this is obviously a side question, but even though you're kitted out to collect honey, have you ever been severely stung by several bees?
Yes, I have. I can recount a story. I had some really, well, I used to do a lot of swarm trapping when I first started, before I converted to mostly buckfast and the hybrids. I was at an apiary and I went in and I hadn't done my suit up, and these were really, really aggressive whatevers, I think F30s, I think the joke would be. But they were terrible black bees. There were some hybrid that sort of had mated with some other stock, and I had them down my suit, in my ear, actually down my ear canal, and all I had was a biro in my truck that I had to get, because the sound was absolutely horrendous, and it's the worst experience I've ever had. And that's when I get stung loads of times, all the time, and luckily I don't react. But getting bees in your suit when they're aggressive is terrible, because you can't undo your suit to take them out. If you do, more get in. You have to just get away. You know, it's terrible. What I did was I had my smoke. I got in my truck and I had to smoke the whole truck before I got in. Huge cloud went in through the smoke. Most of them stayed outside. Then I started swatting, and then I just realized that I didn't kill them, but I was very close to. You know what I mean? I was very close to getting a bucket of soapy water that evening. I tell you, it was one of the most horrible experiences I ever had.
Okay. Do you have a preference for metal or plastic pushing cage?
Okay, I've never tried the plastic ones because I've always had a plentiful supply of the metal ones, but I know quite a few breeders who use the plastic ones, and there seems to be very little difference. The whole thing with it is the pushing cage has to be able to be pushed in to the hard wax. If you have a new frame that's been built and you've got brood on it and you use that, the problem is it's not got the strength of an old frame with lots of old buildup of debris in it. And if you push a cage into a soft wax, they will probably get underneath it or they'll eat away at it, because they always try to. And often when you release a queen, you look around, they haven't got underneath, but they've dug it right out to where you've pushed it into the base of the wax. And if you use whatever you use, as long as you can push that in and it stays solid, you're fine. You're fine. But just be aware that they can do that. It should be fine with the two materials though. Okay,
great. This is a question, I think you might have discussed this. Does Richard count the varroa, or do you treat regardless? And if so, what treatment do you use?
Okay, I have been lax in my varroa treatment in the past until last summer when I started doing some varroa shaker tests. So I know now what my levels are. I do it regularly. I haven't done any this spring yet because my colonies are too small and the numbers are building up, but I will start doing that. If I'm doing queen rearing where I'm adding brood from other colonies, all you've got to do is just give a one-off treatment. You can do it to your cell builder once you've made it hopelessly queenless, because there's no brood in it. So you can zap every single mite in it, and you end up actually with, I think, I know a beekeeper in the UK who's actually weighed queens from a cell builder before the treatment, when he made one load and after, and he found that they were actually heavier after he'd done the treatment. Whether that was just coincidence or a different set of bees finishing, I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but it's actually very easy to do because you've got no brood and it's totally effective. But I just use oxalic acid. I'm going away from amatraz. I'm not going to be using it at all this year, so I'm probably going to have loads of mites, but I'm going to cage my queens in July after our summer flow, and I'm going to be caging them for 24 days, and then we're going to oxalic acid every single hive after in a bid to kill all the phoretic mites, which will all be phoretic by that time. And it's proven to be good. It just comes down to whether you can find a cage that works for you, and whether you have the time and the inclination to cage every single queen, as opposed to going and getting a treatment, popping it in and walking away and leave it do its work. So it's an awful lot more work, but it's a more natural process I'm going to go through, and I hope it's going to work, because I'm convinced that amatraz is not doing its job.
Okay. This was said to everyone, but do you do double grafting?
No, I don't. I only ever put one larvae in one cell. If you look at bee colonies, when you look at a frame, often you'll find two larvae in one cell, but the bees sort that out in time. But and it's amazing how often you see it. But I do not pre-fill my cells with any sterile water, any raw jelly. Some people do. They say it helps better acceptance. I've never found any evidence. What I've found out of all the things I do is the best thing is getting your cell builder perfect, and they'll jump on those cells and then fill them with larvae anyway. So it doesn't make any difference. Okay.
Okay. Can you
in my view?
Okay. Okay. So hang on. So can you put a queen excluder under the bottom box of the cell builder so a strange queen will not come and kill your cells?
Yes, you can. But the problem is it's been done, and the problem is you do get a lot of congestion on the front of the box. It'd be better if you could build, I can't really explain it well, but if you could build a elongated cage that would go over the front, it would give more surface area so the bees could come and go. But I get around it by checking your queen cells after the first 24 hours, 24 hours, and you know they've been accepted, and you know they started that process, so you know they're hopelessly queenless. If a queen gets in, you would discover it before they're all destroyed, or at least you know they're destroyed, so you can do another batch straight away and find the queen. That's the issue. If you wait until they're capped over on day 10, which you can do, and probably 90–95% of the time, be absolutely no problem. but it happens. And there's nothing worse than losing all your cells when you've done all the preparation and you've put all those resources to preparing this box.
Okay, so do you feed the queens in the incubator, and how long do you keep them in there?
Okay, very good question. I get asked this a lot. I do feed the queens. I immediately there when they're being born, I know what time roughly, that it's usually a 12-hour period for a batch, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. I give them water, a drop of water on top of the cell cup, on top of the Nico cage I keep them in, and they also put honey inside the cap, but I mean a tiny amount, and it's in the groove of the cap, because if you put too much honey in, they will get covered in it and they will die. And you have to be really, really careful in doing that. And it's one of the skills. So my queens will hatch, and then the next morning they will go out to the apiary, no matter what, because you cannot really keep queens in an incubator for more than 2 days and expect them to do well afterwards. The key is getting them in as early as possible. And if you work on that, you can look at them, they'll run around on your hand, no problem at all. But if you leave it any longer, you are pushing the boundaries. You've done all that work to get a perfect queen made, get her in a nuke straight away. That's where she needs to be. Okay.
So how do you introduce virgin queens to a made up nuke?
Okay, there's several ways. What I do is I put them in a Nico cage. It's a straightforward introduction cage, or it's what they used to call, what's the name? There's another name for this specific cage. It's a yellow cage, and it's got some excluded on it and some open part with grill, so that the bees can censor it. It's got a candy plug, a cage with a candy plug, that's the word I'm looking for. I generally use that because it works well, and they'll accept a virgin pretty quickly if you've just harvested a mated queen, okay, within 12 to 24 hours. That's what I like to do now. I've changed the way I do things. I change all the time, but it's the way it seems to work best for me, because I seem to get good acceptance, because that queen is then released at night when there's no stress on the colony. There's no robber bees trying to do something to that colony to upset the status of it. They know they've got a queen. They have a little bit of time to get used to her. They see her running around inside. They start feeding her, and then they undo the candy plug and she walks out, and most of the time she's accepted. But I generally put all my queens in my colonies under pushing cages if I can.
Okay.
If there's time.
Okay, so this is Colin's question, your T-man, T-frame.
Yes.
How soon in the season do you add drone comb in drone colonies, and do you remove after queen rearing operation is completed? Okay,
yes, it's a really good question. I do put that in, but I do it when the bees start doing it themselves, when they start introducing, when you open the frames. It's kind of 2 times I do it. If I know that there's, if I see you start the drone comb, which you always do mid-April, then you can start adding your own drone comb if you want to. But what I tend to do is I wait till I know roughly when I'm going to get my first grafts ready, and I do it 40 days before I expect my virgins to be flying. So I'll put the drone comb in, it gets built out, and then I might move that drone comb to another colony that supports drones better, because I'm feeding that colony better. And it takes pressure off a colony you're not looking after, that's a good colony, but you just want to get those drones from it. And then I feed that colony, but I might then graft 3 weeks after I put that frame in, and then by the time the virgins are hatched out, they're off out doing their thing, and the drones are ready. Okay. So it's kind of just planning, writing things down. You just have to keep on top of things.
So do you agree with queen banking in queenless colonies?
When I'm doing a little bit of instrumental insemination, yes, I do agree with it. When I see the figures of what the failures are, I don't agree with it. I see people that bank queens, and I hear about queens that have been banked, and I don't know whether this is true, but I hear something like 30% end up not being good queens after they've been banked for a specific time. It's just figures I've heard. I might be completely wrong. The problem is, when you get a queen that's mated, she can bank really well, and a vast majority will be absolutely fine. She's released afterwards and she'll go off and carry on laying. But some just don't like it. Some just never get going again. The best place for a queen, is in the colony as soon as you can get her in. And if you can always move her without holding her for too long, that's the best option. It's like putting virgins in that are hatched. You don't want to have them in the incubator too long. You always want to look at your way of minimizing your handling, minimizing the transfer, doing the best you can for your queens, because they're the ones that have got to perform.
Okay. So would you buy AI queens for breeder stock?
Yes, I would, but there's no need to, because okay, put it this way. If I was doing some really specific work with a queen that I knew she had really specific traits, like she was varroa resistant, and there was one available I knew she was, I definitely would buy it, because I'd graft from her and I'd have the drones from her. So to me, instrumental insemination or artificial insemination, whatever you want to call it, would be worth doing it then. But for what I need, if I want to buy some breeder queens that are from an island mated scenario that are half the price, there's no difference, because I know the lineage, I know they've had pure background because they're island mated. So there's no real need to buy inseminated queens in that respect. It's all about what you want. What I was talking about before is, if you do buy island mated queens, you are getting that work of someone else, of years of work in your apiary, straight in your apiary. So you're kind of cheating, but it's great because they've done the work and you get this beautiful queen that's got an amazing pedigree. She does everything on the list. She does exactly what it says on the tin. You know, it's brilliant. Bee gives honey, is nice, doesn't sting, blah, blah, blah. You graft from her, and a lot of the daughters are really good. Well, how long would that take you to achieve that in your own apiary with your own stock? A very long time. But I will make the point, I only buy breeder queens that are from the same climate zone. And that's the most important thing, because you want your bees to be perfectly akin to your climate. I wouldn't buy them from Hawaii or North America or something like that. They're just not what I want. I want bees that are going to do well in my environment.
Mm-hmm. How do you guarantee, this is somebody who tried one of your methods last year and it didn't work. How do you guarantee that the pollen frame you add to the cell builder has no eggs or young larvae? He tried your method last season, but the bees used one egg on the pollen frame to produce their own queen cell, which then killed 3 sets of grafts.
Well, that's what I was talking about before, when you, with the method I described of using a small amount of resources, so one 10-frame colony converted, that can happen in that. You have to be meticulous that you check that colony, that it doesn't make queen cells with any of the larvae that's left. But I said that you put, in that particular case, so you put the larvae away from the queen for 5 days before so that they couldn't make a queen cell. In the case he's talking about, what obviously happened is they didn't draw up a cell except the one they wanted to make. That's what bees do. They do odd things, but they made one from the larvae was there. If you'd have gone in there earlier and seen that on day 2, you'd have seen a cup and you'd have just yanked that out with your hive tool. And that's what you should have done. You should inspect it. But you have to be aware that that's what bees do sometimes. They do odd things. Bees are reliably unreliable.
And we are seeing the positive side, aren't we? Yeah. Absolutely.
But by doing that, he tried it and he saw that cell. So next time he'll realize he's got to check, and that's what you have to do. You've got to, with queen rearing, it's a really interesting craft to learn, because you learn as you go, and someone can teach it to you, but you won't really be successful unless you do it yourself and try it yourself.
Well, that comes to, so Euna said, do you do workshops on teaching instrumental insemination?
I'm afraid I don't know, and I am way underqualified to do that.
Well, he said there's only one person, now I comes from Ireland, he said only one person is able to does it in Ireland, and they're quite old. So I think there's an opening, Richard.
Well, there's other people in the UK. I mean, I know Mike Waite from Corseul in Scotland is a UK instrumental inseminator, and we had a big chat about this a few weeks ago because of COVID and all that. And it's a very difficult thing to be in, teaching instrumental insemination. It's not just having students turning up; it's having everything ready. And there's courses that run in America. I know a couple of people who run courses there, but it's just not that easy to run workshops on it, you know. And I don't have the time right now. I've decided in my production that I was going to do, I was going to concentrate more on, at the moment, having a greater number of hives and nucs and bees, rather than doing some of the teaching or creating a Patreon page. So that's the road I've gone down to, because for me, I feel it's the way I want to go at the moment. But regards teaching it, it's another skill, and I, as well, as much as I've learned about instrument insemination, I'm in no way experienced enough to start teaching it, because it's a very, very defined science, and you have to know it inside and out.
Well, somebody, John Kennedy, has said there's a lady, Professor Grace McCormack at the NUI Galway, might be able to help him, so that's quite helpful.
Good.
So
there is people around that do it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's not always courses running. It's very.
And to be honest, Richard, your YouTubes are very. You say you don't do teaching, but I think a lot of people use those as their base. So go to his YouTube channel, everybody. So can you make splits using the cell builder's resources after 48 hours from grafting, rather than moving the bars into?
Yes, you can. For instance, if you have a colony or colonies in your apiary, this is the same thing, it's just a different way of explaining it. If you have colonies in your apiary that need a queen, and for instance, I've had this before where you give them a queen and they kill it, and sometimes they kill it again, even though you've introduced it slowly. If you give them a cell from your cell builder that isn't closed or capped, they will accept that and they'll build it, and then that virgin will hatch. What I'm saying is, you can make splits from the cell builder, but you're better off waiting until, in the main case, you're better off waiting until your cells are mature, and then using your cell builder's resources to make 4 or 5 nukes, which is what you can do. Because you can find a frame of brood from another colony and then divide the nurse bees up. And that's what a good question I'll actually answer, because people ask me a lot of times, well, you've made your cell builder and you've got all these nurse bees that are now turning into different types of bees. What do you do with it after that? So if you're at the end of the year, you can you basically give the whole box a queen, because at the end of the year, you're pushing everything. You've got to get that queen laying, she's got to go off and mate, come back, start making bees. Don't forget, those bees that you made a month before are probably not going to be the bees that go over the winter. So she needs to make her own brood. So you just give one cell to one box and probably call it quits and go, good, that's requeened, I'll use that again next year. But if you're making a cell builder in the early part of the year, you can make 4 or 5 nukes from it after you've harvested your last cells. It's the most natural thing. And every cell gets accepted because it's the cells they made. So it's absolutely perfect. You use the other ones around the apiary or in your apiaries where you need it, and you leave 4 or 5 cells to divide up your cell builder and make nukes out of it.
Okay. This is something I was asking. I was wondering too, how often do you replace your queens, and do you allow the hives to replace her naturally or not? Obviously. Okay.
It's a bit of swarm control. My ultimate goal is to replace my queens every 2nd year, but as things happen, this generally doesn't happen most of the time. Now that I'm just a beekeeper, as from October last year, I'm hoping that I can concentrate my efforts and do that more and start a program of requeening in all my colonies. I'll probably do, I don't know, 100 one year, 100 the next, or something like that. That's my aim, and then I will have less swarming. I will have much younger, more prolific queens that are doing what they're supposed to do and not going, I'm getting a bit old, let's just throw a spanner in the works and throw a few swarm cells and just leave the box. That is what invariably happens though. So, but the other method is obviously regular intervention. I am now going to be available to do more checks. I can now inspect my colonies more often, not just every 10 days. In peak time of the summer, with the flow, you need to be there every 6 days, I think, if you want to realistically hold your colony in the box, because they just build up so quick, and there's so much happening. You need to put the extra in, but the extra you put in pays off in massive gains later in your summer harvest, because you have bees in boxes, not hanging from the trees.
So a question for me, so do you ever have a surfeit of queens?
I arrive usually at end of July with all my mini plus full of queens, and if someone says to me, look, I'm really stuck, can you give us a couple of queens? I'll say, yeah, okay, no problem, they'll buy them. But I don't generally have a surfeit of queens, because they'll always be used, because any queens I have, I'll make a nuke with them. And a nuke is basically a queen with support staff, but you've trebled its value, or more than that. All you've done is put some bees and brood in a box in the summer and given it a queen, and you've trebled that queen's value. More than that, you've made it. Well, what's the prices in England now? £300, I'm hearing, for a nucleus colony at the moment, because of what's happening around England and Brexit and all that. I mean, frighteningly amazing price for bees if you've got nukes to sell, you know, but over here, a colony of bees in the spring will sell for about 160 euros.
Okay.
So it's a little bit less, but the prices are rising too. So it's a no-brainer for me. It's better to have queens used in a nuke, or you can use them somewhere else after.
So this is going back to the drone comb. So concerning introducing drone comb, could the point at which the broods start to draw drone cells indicate a timeline to be vigilant for swarm cells?
I don't. Well, obviously I said, and I do follow this, that when the bees start swarming, that's when we should be making our queens. But I don't really find that there's any correlation between drone comb and an actual swarm cells in your colony. I just find swarm cells arrive when your colonies get really strong, but there happens to be drone comb at the same time. I've seen people talk about it before. Personally, I don't really see any. When you get drone comb, it's swarm time, basically. Yes, absolutely. But I don't see that drone come and go, all right, better check for swarm cells. It's not like that. Swarm cells basically come when the colony is super strong and too strong, you know, and then off they go.
Okay. I think I'm struggling to find all the questions. Somebody has 3 hives. Hive 1 has a buckfast queen and is very calm. Hive 2 and 3 have daughter queens and are more aggressive. Can I successfully breed from hive 1 and produce a second calm colony?
That's the $1 million question. You can try, but what you've got to remember is I don't know much about genetics. Well, I do know a little bit, but your daughter that you make, okay, carries 50% of the genetics from the mother hive, from that queen you grafted from, and all the rest is open to whatever's around. But if your original queen you're grafting from has come from an unknown source who on the second cross could have so many different genetics in her, it's likely that you'll get none of the existing genetics or very little of the existing traits. So the answer to the question is, you can only but try. If you have no other way of, you know, getting a queen that's got a stable background, like a breeder queen. That's what I mean, a stable, proven background of a lineage of stability. At least then you're getting 50% in that daughter. What comes though after, that's unfortunately is in the lap of the gods, unless you do what I've done. But it doesn't really matter. You know, we all have I've got loads of queens that are not nice. You've seen videos of my bees, they all look perfect. That's like the best of the best. I bring the best stuff in, I take the worst away. Every year I have aggressive queens. It's just the way it is, but I try and minimize it. I try and do what I said in the video, in the talk. We all get it, no matter what. And we have names for them. You know, I have a yard where I put all the cranky bees, and there's some really cranky bees in there. And even when I open the gate, I go, oh yeah, there's that one, because she's already trying to sting me, you know what I mean? But people just have to accept that. And if they're really bad, sometimes the best thing is a bucket of soapy water, but they're generally never that bad, and you can always do something with it. You just have to deal with it. So don't not graft queens just because you're worried about them being aggressive. It's not healthy to do that. And I have grafted from other stock here that we've had, and some of them have been lovely daughters. So it just depends, you know. It just depends what is out there mating.
Okay, so I'm sort of going into that everyone's. What do you do with your breeder queen at the end of the season, and and when do you requeen your colonies? Okay,
well, I would. My main objective is to make nukes all year long. Okay, and if I can make early nukes, and I might even split those nukes at the end of the summer and take 3 frames from them, because there's 6 frames, and make more nukes with those nukes. Okay, but the queens I generally use all year round. But if I'm recruiting my production colonies, there's key periods when you would try and requeen under a pushing cage, and that is probably out of the flow. In other words, the June gap is a good time to requeen, and also as soon as the flows finish in the summer. So you've got quite a long time where you can requeen at the end of the year, and it's one of the best times because the bees have done their job. There's technically less work for them to do. So you're not instantly asking that queen that you've requeened to do a job of running a colony for the year. It's just going to settle in for next year. That's generally the best time. I mean, when I was in America, Mike Palmer does all his requeening when at the end of the summer flow, just before the goldenrod starts. So a lot of people tend to do that. It depends. By that time, you've got obviously more queens and more choice of queens to requeen. So it's a logical time.
Okay. Well, I think I haven't actually finished all the questions. There's lots of questions, but I think everyone should unmute. We should thank Richard. And then what I am proposing and what Richard has proposed is that we go off for 5 minutes. And if you want to leave, you can leave.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Everyone's unmuting themselves.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, well, anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. And then what I was saying is we go off for a 5-minute break. Well, and some of you will want to leave. And if you want to stay, Richard is happy to answer more questions. Okay? Mute yourself again.
Yep, fine.
There's another one. I think that was 5 blues.
Who's that? Mute yourself. Oh, I'm back. Yeah, yes. If any of you, so many questions, and if they didn't come directly to me, it was really hard. So I apologize. So I think this gives everyone an opportunity to actually ask their own questions. So I think what we're proposing, isn't it, Richard, that people put the hand up maybe? So you may have to,
Yes, and then they can unmute themselves, but as long as the person asking is okay with their hand up, and then say, can you unmute please, and just ask your question, that'd be the easiest way. There's other forums that do this and it works quite well, I think. So if you're happy to go with that.
He wants to get to know you all. So who's going to go first? I can't see any hands up. There's lots of things in the question box. Okay, I think you're going to have to put your question to me. White.
Anyone wants to ask anything, just fire away.
Or shall I look at the questions and there's still somebody is saying, Robin, are you there? It's the 5 minutes not up. It's only 2 minutes past, Richard.
Yeah, I know. We'll leave it for a few moments.
Robin,
people are probably mid-pointing.
He's already said to me, you didn't ask this question. So can't ask it when he's not here.
People are still probably pointing Percy at the porcelain, so we need to maybe a few minutes.
Well, you're so yeah. I mean, the one thing I was going to ask you, because I'm allowed to ask that sort of question, is do you combine? Do you always go into winter with nukes, or do you combine these colonies?
Combine which colonies do you mean?
Well, I don't know, because they're all they don't look very, especially the picture behind that, your mating nukes or whatever they're called.
Yeah, these are mini plus nukes. Yeah.
Yes.
No, we oh right, okay. So say we harvest a queen, we would take. Say I harvest, I don't know if you can just see it, but say you harvested the queen from that box in the autumn, you take that box and you put it on top of the one next door with a sheet of newspaper between the two, and you make that colony super strong to overwinter with 4 bodies on. And that's generally what you do. You have a surplus, you do have a slight surplus of queens, and you can do that. And it's a way of guaranteeing, if you haven't got enough stores, that you can give that colony stores, because you're taking the resources from one and giving it to another, and you get a queen somewhere else. So that's what we do. But I've overwintered these boxes on one body this winter. I've got 3 or 4 just on one body, and providing you set them up well, they're overwintered just fine.
Okay. So Robin, are you back yet? Hello. 2 of them have raised their hand. Oh, quick! How exciting! Sorry, okay. Who's raised their hand? So can you see that? I'm sort of was looking at the questions for a second.
I can see it. So.
Oh, good. Okay. So who's raised their hand? First one. Who?
Paul Moran.
Paul, do you want to ask a question?
Oh yeah. Thanks, Richard, and thanks for the talk.
Hi,
Paul. I'm a fan on YouTube as well. It's great to see some of the stuff you put out. Can I ask you how you got up to an operation where you were able to get to the size you are in a relatively short period of time? Like, did you start out with a big number of hives, or have you just built up from a small number yourself?
Well, I built up from a small number. It's a good question. I have fallen on my feet in some respects because my colleague Christian, he has a workshop with everything going, everything running, and I've kind of come into that. And he's happy for me because I've worked with him, and he's kind of wanted me to be like an apprentice over the years. So I worked with him. We've done all sorts together. We tried different things, but I've learned the craft as well as doing it myself. I've had his huge influence, and obviously I've got a lot to thankful for him. So it was easy for me in that respect to migrate from having, I think it was really the 40 colony mark made the difference. When I went above 40 hives, I was like, right, I can no longer extract in my veranda because my kids left the door open when I was harvesting, and like 1,000 million bees got in. And then it was at that point, I'm like, they kind of phoned me up and said, Dad, you said don't leave the door open, So that's what happened. And then it's like, right, this has got to change. So you get to a certain point, but then I was able to, because I understood about sustainability and making nucs from hives and splitting nucs, I was able to rear queens. That's been my biggest bonus to me, that I've been able to make my colonies numbers up quickly. And I've only had 200 colonies for the last 2.5 years. I've always had, some, like last year I had a lot of winter losses last winter, not this winter now that we're just leaving. But this winter looks a lot better, and I've learned and I've evolved, and you have to pick yourself up and brush yourself off being a beekeeper. But luckily I had at that time the resources of working for other clients, so I had that other income coming in. Now it takes on a whole new dimension because I am a professional and I'm on my own doing just bees. But I have a little bit of income from the YouTube, and I have a little bit of income from doing some talking, and I also sell my nucs in the spring. I have a pollination contract with the state, with France, that actually just paid me today, believe it or not, and that's like a massive bonus in March. But it all adds up, and it's just you just work to your means. But I'm putting things into place all the time to have more colonies. My goal would be to have 250 colonies running, because you can't really manage more than 250 on your own, and that includes everything. And you have to split those colonies to help against swarming. You have to make nucs to sell. They go hand in hand, and then the queen ring goes hand in hand as well. But you have to find a level for you, But 250 is a maximum, and it's taken me probably 8 years from going, oh, I really like this, I really want to do this, and then realizing that I was going to do it professionally. But I didn't really know that at the start. I had this dream I could do it, and then I said, no, I'm going to do it. Because if you say you're not sure, you're never going to do it. You just have to go and do it. And that's what it's all about. You have to just put things into place. You have to be realistic, but you just do it. I've got 3 kids. One of them's autistic. I have my daughter at university. I've got bills to pay like everybody else, but you just have to organize it and do that. And that's what it's all about. That's life. You just get on with it. But it's been really, really fantastic learning curve for me. And now I actually find it easier than it was before, because I'm not doing 2 jobs at once. I can focus solely on this. Last 3 weeks has been a dream. I've gone to the apiaries and got jobs done. So it's all it's all relevant to what you do.
Okay,
thanks.
You're welcome.
Margaret, are you around? Margaret North?
Yes,
Do
hi.
you want to ask your question?
Well,
Hi, Margaret.
Hi. I got cut off during the first section of the question time, so you may have covered this already. I run about 12 dozen hives, and I like to rear, the last few years I've started queen rearing, and like to rear 10 in the little Apiary boxes.
Yes.
Each year. But the method I've used, and it does seem to work, and I just wonder what you thought, is that I find a hive that I don't like the queen, and I think she has got to go. She's not very nice. She's laying well, doing everything. And what I do is build her up, or try and get her built up. And then just as I'm about to start queen rearing, I actually kill her off and then go back in 6 days later and take then any queen cells. And I use that as my starter and my finisher. And it's only a small setup. So
Well, what I'll say is
that okay?
Immediately I'll say congratulations, you understood the process. You know exactly what you need to do. to get those queens, to that queen or that absence of queen to rear those cells. And that's brilliant. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Some people in America, I know, for example, raise all their queens by that method, and it's a very good method. You're just putting the colony into the immediate emergency mode, and if it's strong already, there's plenty of resources, and they'll build your cells. Very good.
The reason I do it is because where I live, there aren't that many beekeepers around me, and my queens in the past have always been not very good tempered, swarm easily. So I take the mini nucs down under the hill, which I call down under the hill, down to Taunton, which is a lot better temperature and better climate. And
Okay.
I have somewhere down there where I put them, and I get them to mate down there. And I do find it is better stock than what I get at home. You know, and I think probably that's due to lack of other beekeepers being quite as enthusiastic as I am on top of the hill where I am. There aren't that many around me. So that's my purpose for doing it. And again, like you said, it's a question of thinking about doing it, but then just deciding, what the hell, I'm going to have a go at this, because this is something I wanted to do for several years. And about 2 years ago, I thought, right, I've got to do this. I'm going to do it. And yeah, I should do it every year now. I think it's, you know, the way to go.
If you find, as I said before, if you find a method that works for you, that's brilliant. I mean, not everyone would want to do that, but if you're in a place that's fairly isolated and it works, fantastic. You know, you understand the process, and that's what it's all about. You know what instigates the queen to make cells, or the absence of a queen to make new cells, and it's brilliant. You're doing the method that's like what we call the cull method. So you're getting rid of your worst stocks and allowing your other ones to thrive, and that's basic. You always get good returns from that. You always will, but it's not the quickest, but it's a good way of basic management of your stocks.
Okay, just before we go, so 2 people have raised their hand, but Robin, are you back yet, or have you disappeared and left your video gone?
No, I'm here.
Okay,
So-
do you want to ask your question that I rudely didn't ask the first time?
Well, I don't
Robin.
know. It got caught up, I think, with the other question. It was regarding the what you do with your breeder queens at the end of the season. Do you overwinter them and then use them again the following season, or do you then put them into ordinary hives and use them as an ordinary queen?
Okay, well, for me here, I like to try there's a couple of ways of thinking about this. You can use your breeder queens for drones as well as for grafting from, and obviously everyone wants the best of both worlds. So some people keep their nucleus colonies in small boxes and they just add frames and take them out, and that keeps that queen laying, but it keeps her a bit confined, so she kind of lasts a bit longer. If you put your queen in a big box, she gets more exhausted quicker, she's worn out quicker. At the end of the season, most people put their breeder queens in a nuc to overwinter because it's easier to manage. I personally usually keep an eye on them. I'll just run them. I run mine in a 10 frame box over the winter because that's what they're in most of the year. But if they're getting old and they're not laying so well, I will reduce them down in a nuc, and that's the way I manage it. You've got to take into account how old the queen is. I mean, I had a beautiful Kel Brandstrup overwintered queen that I bought, and it cost me $350 4 years ago. And she lasted 3 years, and she was amazing. And at the end, she was just in a nuc, and she was still churning out cells, but she seemed to kind of get better again by just being put in a nuc. So I would treat them, obviously they're like you know, they're the ones, if you're going to lose a breeder queen, they're the ones you'll lose, you know what I mean? It's but,
Thank you for that.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for the comments.
I think it's Janet's turn. Janet Bates.
Oh, hello. Thank you for the lovely talk. Very good.
Hi, Janet. Thank you.
Do you find your cranky bees produce more honey?
Very good question. Yes and no. Some of the colonies do, some of them don't. I could say it's probably 50-50. That if I take the colonies to somewhere else, some of them will do really well and some of them will swarm, and that's probably why they're cranky, because they were swarmy and just not the genetic I wanted. And when I mean genetics, I'm talking about, I'm in no way kind of managing it. I'm just doing the best I can with the materials I've got. I say genetics, it sounds very complicated and all, but it's not. It's mostly cull and move in and move out. And I'm now beginning to do some instrumental insemination with some better genetics, which is hopefully in the long term going to give me better daughters, blah, blah, blah. But I really cannot, I don't see much difference. I do agree that the mean colonies seem to give more honey, but I've seen no actual percentage that would say the mean ones get more honey in that respect. But it's always, well, perhaps it's because you're trying to harvest from a mean one, and that's why we know they're mean. Because when you take the honey off them, you know all about it. But I use clearer boards in the autumn and in summer harvest, so it's just putting the clearer boards on where the issue is. After that, you just come in and take the honey off, and then come back later.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you.
Ted, you've got your hand raised. Well, you did. Do you want to ask a question, Ted? Oh, he's gone. Ted Futterer? Not.
He's
Not here?
muted.
He's muted.
There you go. I'm back.
Hi,
I'm
Ted.
back.
yeah.
Hey, Richard. Hey, okay. So the question during the feeding process of the starter cells, you say to put sugar water on to emulate, a nectar flow. We've used just open frames of honey. Obviously, make sure you have plenty of pollen. I haven't tried the sugar. I don't do that a whole lot. Your thoughts?
Where are you based, Ted?
We're in Florida. Welcome from Florida. Yeah.
Thanks for
Northwest.
coming. Nice to speak to you. Yeah, if as I said, if it works for you, great. What I tend to do is I don't actually have a huge amount of honey in my starter box because I like to leave space so that the wax builders can build wax on the foundation, and I give them that flow so they can do that, and it leads to other things. But if you have too much honey in your box, it just leaves too much congestion.
Okay.
I know it won't really affect your cells that are starting, but it's what works for you at the end of the day. It's an interesting question. As long as they've got plenty of food, why not? If you use open frames of honey, brilliant. If you've got that,
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
But just try it with just a feeder and see if there's any difference. It's all about trying different methods, and you will iron out something if you find along the way.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Bonnie Joseph, I think you've got your hand raised. Do you want to ask a question?
I do.
Hi, Bonnie.
I'm from London, Kentucky in the US. My question is, are you familiar with the Snellgrove boards, or what we call a double screen board? And do you use those in the winter to stack one hive on the other?
No, I don't, because we don't have severe winters here. Where we are in Brittany, we're quite influenced by the English Channel and the Gulf Stream, so we don't generally do that. And I believe you do that because the two colonies together overwinter better. Is that correct?
It is.
Yeah.
You can put a smaller colony over the top. The double screen board has the center of the board open, double screen on each side of a 3/4 inch plywood, so they get the heat, but the queens can't transfer, the pheromones can't transfer between. So it actually adds extra heat to the top hive that is a weaker hive.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't use a Snellgrove board. That's a different method of rearing. As I said, I use the Mike Palmer, as you obviously know. I use the 10/10 method just because it works for me. I just find it so easy to use. And with our boxes we have, they're a really good size to use for that,
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. Suzanne Foster, are you there? It's a bit like,
Hello.
Hi, Suzanne.
I was wondering, how many hives did you have when you decided to become a commercial beekeeper?
Okay, very interesting question. I think it was probably around the 30 to 40 hives, because you can become what you would maybe call, and I don't mean this defamatorily wise, where you become like a backyard beekeeper. Most people have maybe 20, 30 hives. Once you get to that level, then it's kind of, if it becomes more, it's a lot more work, and you enter down that road. You have to have more equipment, everything else. I think it was about the 30 or 40 hive mark. And then for me here, luckily I had the chance of buying some hives under a government scheme. And if you bought 100, you could reclaim some of the money back. So I said I needed some money, went and borrowed some money off my dad, and said, look, I want to do this. And he said, you sure? I said, yeah. He said, well, okay, go for it. So I bought 100 hives. They all got filled. And then I'm like, okay, this is it. But then I've got other work and family commitments, everything else. So it had to kind of meet in the middle then, and then I advanced from there. But once I got to the 30 hive mark, it was the foregone conclusion, really. Don't get me wrong, I do appreciate that I'm in a very lucky position where I live, it is very good to be a beekeeper because I've got plenty of room to put my hives, and I have a place I can extract my honey and a workshop, and it kind of all fitted in. And France kind of is this area of France is a very agricultural based area. So anything that fits in with the other farmers, you're kind of accepted and you get a little bit of help and you're all in the same boat kind of thing, you know? Right. So that's where I think I've done well. But anyway, right. It's an interesting question.
No, that's really helpful. I've got 8 hives so far, but I would love to go commercial. And it's just a shame we don't have a similar grant up in the northeast of England.
It was a grant, but it was only to buy some of the material. I had to still manage moving into those hives on my own accounts. I think you have to say, if you're going to become a beekeeper, it's not an obsession. You have to have the obsession and the passion at the start, but when you become professional and it's your only source of income, it becomes your everyday life. I wake up thinking bees, I go to work thinking bees, I do bees all day, I come back in the evening, I think of bees. It's what you can't put it to bed at 9 o'clock, and especially in the summer, you're doing 12, 15, 16-hour days every day, and it's exhausting. But in the winter, you have time off, and that's the beauty of North Hemisphere beekeeping, is that you do get quieter times when you can do what you like. You work really hard, you put the time in, you know what you have to do, then you can profit from that.
You go to Hawaii.
That's really good, thank you.
No, you're welcome, thank you.
As I said, you go to Hawaii for a holiday. So Pete, Jesper, you got your hand up?
Hi, Rich.
Hi, Peter.
I'm from South Derbyshire in England. I follow you on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I recognise your name.
I know this.
Yeah.
I thought you might.
Nice
We
to meet
spoke
you.
once before, I think. Hi. I know this winter you made some sugar bricks, and I've made some too. I was wondering what your experience with them was, and are you going to be using those moving forwards, and maybe not using fondant? That's certainly my experience. What have you found?
Really good question, and it's interesting you ask, because I've actually just put my last ones on. I found my nucs this year are guzzling the stores because we've had a lot of flying weather but cold, so it's just flying, plenty of pollen coming in, but no nectar, obviously, and all the blocks I put on have gone, and I wish I'd made more, because I find the problem we have, fondant is exorbitant here. It's like a crazy price, and you can make sugar blocks for, I think, less than half the price of the weight of fondant. You know what I mean? That's what it works out as, and the bees absolutely love them. So I'm going to probably look at getting some different molds next year that give a different shape. I do like the rectangular block size. I need to get a load of those, and I'm probably going to make them up in a cement mixer at work. Just do a load, like, 150 at once, because if you put it on and they don't touch it, fine, you just take it off again. If you put it on and they take it, it's gone. It just seems, I have heard this theory that if you feed a lot of sugar blocks, it can damage the bees' tongues over time, but I don't know whether that's true. Apparently it wears their tongues out. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's interesting theory. But they seem to love it, and it's much cheaper. And I do believe that it helps absorb some of the moisture coming out of the colony, because as it wets up, they take it down. So
no, thank you. That's exactly my experience, and I was interested to see how you got on with having used.
I've only used them for the second year. I didn't use them much last year, but the ones I did, I really like using them. So I made a load up. I made, I think, 100 up this October, and they've all gone. And literally, I put the last 2 on the other day. And what I've actually had to do is, in the video I've just done, you might have seen the dead out colonies I had. I've actually taken the honey from then and selected the best frames and given them to my nucs as well, because the nucs could be 3 weeks away before any nectar comes in yet. If we have this, there's another little cold spell coming this week. You've got to be so careful. They're not shut down; they're just moving. So, and all that time they're burning stores.
Okay,
that's a good source of emergency feed if the need is.
Absolutely, and if you see them
you can take
even half of it down, they've got that. They put it right next to where they need it, and you're like, well, at least they've got something. You know what I mean? So, and it's easy to put on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Some people have put questions in the chat, and I don't know whether you want to ask them yourselves. So, Sandra, do you want me to ask you a question, or are you happy to unmute and ask it? Or have you left us?
No, I'm here. Can
Hi,
you hear
Sandra.
me? Let's see if I can start the video too. I saw the cage that you're using is a lot bigger than the cage that I've been using, and I wonder how much time you leave the queen under the cage for.
Is that the pushing cage for introduction?
Yeah, the pushing cage.
Okay, right.
Is quite big.
We say usually 4 to 5 days once she's installed under the cage, and then you can lift the cage off. I mean, Nico make one now. I think they're a white plastic one, and you can make them out of many things. So as long as she's under there and she's securely pushed in to that. One of the biggest things I found is, as I mentioned before, if you don't use a frame that's got older wax, it's easy for the frame to fall off, or you knock it when you lift it out. You don't realize where it is. You don't mark it on the top. You say you know where it is, but you never remember which side it's on. And when you lift it out, you knock it off. And if she's not ready and she's released, she's gone in the colony, and they're like, will she make it? Will they kill her? It's better if you wait till there really is a good amount of eggs underneath that that cage and she's laid in the cells, and then you can be confident that she is accepted on both sides of the cage. So at least 4 or 5 days.
And do you choose a sort of specific place to put that cage where there's a bit of resources, a bit of food around? And
You need to put it over. If you go onto my YouTube channel, if you look up the video called Requeening in Vermont, it explains it on that. But you must find a little bit of honey somewhere on that frame, and you put the queen underneath, and you can actually move the the cage over the top without obviously squashing the queen, but she'll be running around. You can just blow her around a bit if you want to. She will. You can centralize it over emerging brood, and obviously the more emerging brood, the better. That's why I use a bigger cage, because I find that the bigger the cage, there comes a point where it's too big, and if it's not stiff enough metal, the cage can bend, and then you're into problems. So you want a sort of at least 7-inch by 7-inch, maybe 8-inch by 8-inch cage if you can. A 6-inch by 6-inch is fine, but I like a little bit bigger, and then you can centralize that cage directly over you want, and you can always find some honey to leave with that emerging brood, and then they'll feed that queen, they go to the honey, everything's happy.
And that's over 4 or 5 days. Marvelous.
Yeah, 4 or 5 days minimum. And if you take the cage off, watch the queen. If there's bees starting to be aggressive, pick her up with your fingers, get another frame from somewhere else, or put her back underneath the cage and leave it for another 5 days. She'll be fine. Just make sure. I've released a couple, and they've had her straight away. And often it's because there's a queen cell you've missed in the colony, or there's a rogue virgin somewhere else running around. And that's what happens when you make colonies queenless. There's always that risk, and there's always a reason why. You just have to find it.
Thank you. Great talk.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
So Janet, you want to ask another? Good. Ask a question, Janet.
Were some of your frames plastic?
Yes, our super frames are all plastic. They're made by a French company called Nico that make the same queen rearing equipment, and they do a lot of. You saw the bases I use; they're plastic as well. The French have this product called Baticad, and it's basically a honey super that it's pre-built, so it's half built out already. So all the bees do is they just build the last last maybe, what would it be, about 10 mil either side. They expand it out. But the great thing is, if you get pollen in your frames, you can pressure wash them and it all comes out, and then you can put them back in. As I said, you have to get them rebuilt on 10s per box, but then as soon as you've got them rebuilt, you can use them, space them to 8s, because there's that extra bit of comb and they won't build between the combs, and the summer harvest is all on your 8 frames. And the plastic frames, we've only, I think, thrown 2 away. So I would consider them to be fairly environmentally friendly in terms of the use we get of them. I'm pretty interested in discussing this. We had a discussion the other day about brood frames being plastic. And my personal view is that the brood frames you need to change, and a lot of people just throw them away. And I don't think that's a very good source to use for brood frames. I believe the brood nest, myself, my own personal opinion is the brood nest should be in wax and foundation, so you can melt it down and renew it, which is great. But the honey supers, if they build it well and they're in plastic, fantastic. You know, literally we've only thrown 2 away, and we've got thousands, and we threw 2 away because I put them through the wax melter by mistake, and they completely twisted up and went deformed. So my mistake. But in terms of sustainability, they're a good product, really are.
So Ian has been waiting patiently. Ian Haslam.
Hi, Richard. Thank you. Love the
Hi, Ian.
enthusiasm. Feeling invigorated. It's great. My question, nothing to do with the queens, I'm afraid. With so many colonies and obviously a large honey extraction, your supers, do you try and return them to their hives to be cleaned, or do you store them wet?
Right. This is at the end of the season, is it? After our. Okay. Obviously, in the spring flow, we get them straight back on the hives because it's the most logical thing to do, and they will eat up anything that's left if some of it crystallizes, which sometimes happens. In the summer, they all go back onto the colonies, but we put them back in kind of like 4 and 5 above a colony. So I put a feeder on first, and the feeder compartmentalizes the brood nest still. So the brood doesn't feel, or the queen or the bees don't feel they've got, I've got this huge space. They don't feel they've got to go up into the supers, but it gives the bees a little access to go into the supers to forage. And they all go in, they clean out all the supers gently. There's no robbing, there's not a frenzy in the apiary, because it's a sealed, a kind of what you say, a genteel cleaning. That's the way I like to use. So it's a really good question, because I used to open clean my frames before. And so basically what you're asking is, are they wet, are they dry? They're all dry because they're cleaned by the bees, but not in a frenzy. They're cleaned in a controlled clean. It's a lot of work because you have to, I could easily go to a yard, chuck them out on the floor and come back 2 days later. But we have so many wasps and hornets by then, and it just creates a frenzy in the apiary, and then you get other issues in the apiary. There's always the problem with possible disease, contamination. If you had a disease frame, that's going to transfer to a lot of colonies. I've never seen it yet, but it's a possibility. You also got wasps in a frenzy, which is not what you want. If you put them on top of a feeder, and you've got that kind of compartmentalization where the brood nest stays the same and there's no flow on, they won't go into the supers and build. They'll just bring anything from that super down. That's what we find works for us. But it is extra work, but you get nice clean supers that you don't have any, like, you know, bits ripped off them, because when you open cleaning them, the wasps and that, they tear them to shreds because there's such a frenzy. You don't get that. You get nice frames built for the next year. So I hope that answers your question. Other people do pack them wet. They just wrap them in plastic and they pack them wet and they say that's fine.
I did them the dry way a year or so ago, trying to make sure they went back on the hive they came from, which was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
This winter I've stacked them sealed, so ply at the bottom, sealed, newspaper between each one and sealed at the top, and then ratcheted down. And I'm going to find out this week whether they've all gone mouldy or not. Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully not.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a question. Well, it's difficult to say, but if you've got newspaper between them, that really helps them kind of breathe a bit and absorbs the moisture as well. So I think you've just got to try it, like you say, and, you know, if it doesn't, it's a problem I have to deal with. But at that time of year, we do have a little bit more time, and that's all I'll say about it, because I don't mind. And what we tend to do is we end up with, you can do a lot at once. We have, so say for instance, you extract 2 apiaries worth and you've got, I don't know, 40, 50 supers, you can easily load them back on the truck and then distribute them into one apiary in one foul swoop. So you put 4 or 5 on each hive, put the roof back on, the seal they're in. Yeah. That's kind of what we do. And then you forget about them for 6 weeks and you go, I've got to get those supers off. But by that time, all your harvesting's done, your treatments are in, you know, you're finished. So you have to just try.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. So we've got, so I'll go Andrew Woodhouse, then Alan Thurlow, and then Suzanne Foster. Okay. Is that so? Andrew, you're up.
Yeah, I was just wondering what that fabulous tree was by your house.
What, the main one with the snow picture, or just before that?
With all the blossom on, literally.
The yellow blossom.
Yes.
Yeah, that was actually up the road. That's a mimosa. We get this. It's just common mimosa. I can't remember the Latin name, but they're very brittle and they're very prone to wind damage. But if you get it right, and they do flower about February, March time, some years later, some years earlier, it's a massive pollen. It really is.
Okay.
They absolutely come in with like massive bags of it, more than they do rapeseed. So it's a really good plant, but it's very spindly. And often if it snows and it's like wet, you'll get huge limbs smashing off, you know. But there's so many people got it around here. Wherever you go, there's always someone within a kilometre.
Yeah, it is quite windy down here, so maybe it's not the best idea. But
you could plant one and see. I mean, they take a while to get going, but it's a good little plant to have.
Yeah.
Well, a tree, I should say.
Yeah. Cheers.
So Next question is Alan Thurlow.
Thanks, Sally. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Alan. Nice to see you.
Hi, Bud. Back to the cell builder, start to finish to queen. Can you do this with sort of within 15 to 16 days by the time she hatches?
Can you just repeat the question? Because what I would say, I'll just interrupt a bit, is that the from grafting, well, obviously the natural, yes, from 0 to hatching is 16 days normally. But we say day 1 is grafting there, which is day 3 to 4 of the natural process. What part were you asking? I didn't quite, because your connection's a bit iffy, sorry.
So what I'm thinking is, from the cell builder, you set that up on the day, and then you wait your 10 days for the brood that you've put up to make sure there's no eggs that could possibly be turned into. So what I was thinking, if I needed to reduce those days, I could try and just put cat brood on the top without any larvae in.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And you can be even more thorough than that. You can search for brood that's just about to emerge. But it's not just, it's that is possible, but it's more work. And if you've got enough stores and resources, you can do it. And I do that sometimes. And I sometimes add brood that is emerging. I'll find a frame that's just starting to emerge because it just changes color a tiny bit. They get a little bit darker. And you can see the first ones where the queen's laid earlier. And do you see those antennas sticking out? Right. I'll take that frame, and you can bring it forward by 4 or 5 days. But the process is 10 days, because that's the time generally that if you have a frame of mostly cat brood, any other larvae will then become too old for them to make a cell when that becomes the starter box. That's why we do that. But
because you want them as young as possible.
If you speed it up, you don't want to do any less than 5 days, because any eggs that are laid, they're still viable for 2 or 3 days after. So if you did less than that and you put that frame into your builder, they might use one of the larvae that's still just about doable to raise a queen. So you've got to be careful.
Are you saying like minimum 21 days then, start to finish from cell builder?
No, from the cell builder, it's still the 16. Oh, sorry, yeah. Yes and no. Okay, is the answer. If you're feeling confident, bring it down a bit. Okay. But I have a cell builder running the whole time, and in the summer, and I just add brood to it, or I make it up again and restart again. So it's kind of a movable feast for me, because I know what to look for and where I should be checking. But if you've never done it before, I would advise you to follow a protocol of a method to the T, and then learn from it, because then you will have the experience that it worked and you won't be disappointed. Because if you try and be smart with bees when you don't know it that well, the chances are you will become unstuck and you'll be extremely frustrated. Because if you don't have many resources and it's the first time you tried it, just keep it simple. Follow the route, follow the road, and then afterwards you can say, great, that worked. Right, I'll try and bring that a couple of days earlier next time, and then see where it goes from there. I've seen a lot of people try and be smart. That's all I'm saying, and I just don't want people to fail. I want them to be successful, and you have to give it the all at the start to be successful in it, because there's a way of doing it, and the way to do it is follow the road.
I mean, thanks for that. I mean, that's why I thought I'd ask, because sometimes I'm really limited with time. Obviously, haven't got the luxury, and with work commitments and stuff like that. But thanks for the talk this evening. Thanks to the Cambridgeshire Beekeepers Association as well, Sally. And brilliant. Thanks, guys.
No, thanks very much for your comments.
So
Much
Patrick,
appreciated.
you're up next.
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Could you tell me a little bit more about?
Sorry. Carry on, Pat. Yeah.
Sorry, different.
It's okay.
I didn't know. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. You're fine.
Okay. So I was going to ask about, you went through the cell builders, but the cell finishers, how do you set it up, and how do you continually run that?
Okay, well,
2 or 3 separate runs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a finisher is a working colony. It's a box that you can basically, I always say it's a box you can partition off while it's working. So one part of it you can keep the queen away from. That is a finisher. because when you put cells above a queen excluder that are already started, they will finish them as queen cells always, because the bees know no different. They just see it, those vertical cells, and they sensed, I think, the pheromone in those queen cells, and they finish them as queen cells. No matter where you put them, they always finish them. So the management of it is, what you have to do is, say you have 5 frames over 5 frames and your queen is in the bottom. You have to bring brood. It's like any other colony you want to keep in the box. You want to bring open brood, that's larvae that aren't capped, up into the top. So where you put your cells, to be finished, that's where it'll attract nurse bees. The nurse bees will already be up there and they've got plenty of resources to finish your cells. That's why I only put 14 in, because don't forget, it's a working colony. So the bees in it are already still finishing other cells. So they're already feeding larvae, but if you put them next to larvae that they're finishing, they finish yours just as well. But you have to rotate it. And often you have to take frames from that colony and move them away because the colony gets too strong or it gets too much honey, and at different times of the year you have to do different things to it. So that's how you manage it. You're constantly revolving frames, giving a foundation, right? Is that strong? Is it too strong? Is it too weak? You don't want to make it too weak because otherwise they won't finish the cells properly. That's why I was trying to explain about 14 cells per cell bar that I finish in it, because you really want to give them every chance to make sure that it can be over strong. That isn't the issue. It's when it's under strong, that's when you waste your resources, because they just don't finish the cells properly.
Should we add extra frames of pollen into it?
Yeah, you can do, but you will find if you have a 5 over 5, most of the time they have enough feed in there, because you move that pollen frame to the top as well. So one side you'll have open brood, the other side you put a pollen frame. If you don't have that, you can put some pollen sub on the top and a feeder. You just constantly look at every scenario and make sure that whether it's the builder, the starter box or the finisher, they've got everything they need. Yes, certainly, pollen frame, great idea. But you'll find you will have one in that colony because it's a working colony.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Lemons, your turn.
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that I'm from the Netherlands, and I use Mini Plus hives as well. And I was introduced to this by my mentor. Apparently, with only 2 beekeepers in the neighborhood who use Mini Plus beehives, but they're really, really versatile. And I think that would be something that would be really interesting if you could talk about that more, how they're much more versatile than a little an Apiary or you know, I've overwintered little Mini Pluses in one box, 2 boxes, 3 boxes, and it all works. And the colonies that come out the next winter are just really, really strong.
Yeah.
And that's amazing to me. And in our neighborhood, there's a lot of beekeepers I meet who don't really know how to raise queens or how to propagate colonies. And with Mini Plus it's almost automatic. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. We have issues sometimes with winter losses with Mini Plus, but that's generally through Asian hornet. We have that big problem here now. We get pressure on the colonies later in the year, and they're systematic, and it pressurizes the colony, and the queens stop laying. So we don't have enough brood in the autumn to make winter bees. But on the whole, I find Mini Plus really good. What we do in the spring is we put that 2 or 3 framed colony on top of a nuke and then let it grow down, or we just break them down again. And then you make more and you can get more queens. The great thing is they're not too small, so they swarm quickly, but they give you that overlap. They give you that bit of what we call play. You don't have to be there every day. Whereas something like the Apiary, the smaller mini mating, the Keeler ones, they're so small that if you miss one day's intervention and when you should be there 3 days after you didn't go, they'll abscond or something like that. With Mini Plus, they're solid. They always, but they're not, this doesn't use too much resources. It's a great box. I totally agree.
Yeah, one other thing I heard you say was that the brand was Bute.
Yeah.
But that's actually a German word for beehive.
Well, that's the name on the box that we see. It's in there. It's like a registered trademark, and they say it's called Butte. So it's interesting you say that. Thank you.
Look on the polystyrene ones are most of them made by Steer.
Yes, right, Steer. Yeah, I have Steer Dadon as well.
Oh,
it could be that's the company.
Yeah, that's the company who makes the polystyrene Mini Plus hives.
Okay.
The other word is just Boiter for beehive.
That's good.
That's interesting. Thanks, you corrected me there. Thank you.
Thank goodness we've got a Dutch person here to explain all this.
Well, you know, we're in between England, Germany, Belgium.
I know. I think at this point is Mark here, because I didn't ask his question. Mark Bleary, are you here? Hello. Oh no, he's gone. Oh
no,
no,
he's there.
Oh, I am here.
Hi, Mark.
I felt really bad, Mark.
Not Bleary. No, you laugh. I'm new and I'm starting this year, and I was looking at AIs because the open mating, you never can be sure, can you? And we all hear about buckfast and the offspring of buckfast being a bit nadgy. If you get an AI queen and use her as your breeding stock, you're buying yourself a couple of years, aren't you? And then
you're in essence, you're buying yourself more than that.
Well, so I asked a question before, would you buy an AI? I'm a small guy, got 6 hives, maybe going up to 10. I'm thinking maybe starting with an AI as a breeder queen.
You certainly can, but it's an awful lot of money you don't need to spend. If you just buy a good island mated queen, that's good enough for what you need.
I've heard of island mated queens. I've read Tom Seeley, but never seen one advertised as an island mated queen.
Well, if you go to Buckfast Holland, all the F1s are island mated. The Marken, let's go for a Marken queen. They're all island mated queens.
Marken, spell that?
Marken, M-A-R-K-E-N.
Got it. I shall write that down. I shall do that. Thank you very much.
If you go to my
can I just check,
YouTube
you're not
channel,
going to France? You're not the person who emailed me saying he was moving to France?
No, I'm not. Thank you for
there's no need to buy an instrumentally inseminated queen, because an island mated queen already has the lines controlled.
I can see that.
So you're paying a heck of a lot of money for a queen when you don't really need one. I wouldn't really buy an inseminated queen myself unless I was, as I said before, really interested in some really specific genetics, because I'm not producing. Instrumental inseminated queens are purchased by big breeder companies who want to have absolutely pure lines to follow them through and to knock them out. And that's when they would buy those, because they know they can prove that the lineage and everything is much more important. But for us, for breeders of, well, I don't even consider myself a breeder. I consider myself a queen rearer, because I'm not really doing a lot of selection, because I generally tend to buy and breeder queens, because what I have flying around here is really difficult to breed from, because it's like hybrid. So I just buy in a good breeder queen every year, or two or three queens a year, and select from those two and breed from that. That's what you should think of.
I am quite lucky in that where I live, I've got a guy around the corner who is a queen breeder, and I bought a couple of last year from him.
And where do you live, Mark?
I live in Diss in Norfolk, and
okay.
we caught a swarm last year, our very first ever bees. They superseded very quickly. The new queen is absolutely marvelous, and we think she went off and mated with the queen mirrors drones around the corner.
Almost certainly.
And we're thinking of using her maybe as our breeder queen.
And can I just say, Richard may not be a queen breeder, but he is an entertainer. He
is that, yes.
Well, technically, I am a queen breeder, but the reason why I say that is the minute you take any it's kind of said that if the minute you take any queen from a box and you select larvae from another colony to graft into that box, that's when you become a queen breeder. But I find the term is very a bit pompous. I think that a lot of people who are just trying to raise a few good queens are not breeders. I think the breeders are these specialized guys, and what I'm saying is I give them the credit they deserve, because I am well out their league. They spend a lifetime of selecting and breeding and crossing. It is their lifetimes where I'm a honey producer, I'm a nuke seller, I'm a queen rearer, I sell some queens. I'm not a specialized queen breeder, and that's what these people are, like Stoffen, like Peter Little in the south of England, like other good breeders there. You know, they spend their lifetime selecting stock and swapping stock with other people from Europe, and that's where the real meat is, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
And
it's a
I
setting
would
up-
also, sorry, I have to add in, and I would say he has now found himself a vocational speaker role for the Cambridgeshire Beekeepers Association.
Sure, I'm trying to get my head around the whole setting up of the breeder colony and the finisher colony, and I've been looking at Stuart Spinks and thinking my way is going to be the cloak board, and you can use the same colony for both things. I'm only a small guy, a small number of hives, use the same hive for both. Just starting up one set of queens on one frame and then changing it into the finisher colony by taking the board out.
Absolutely. If that works for you, you do that.
Well, I'm hoping it will work. If it doesn't, I should.
This is what it's all about. You've got to try it, though. All you need to do is understand the process. That's the most important thing.
Okay, so are there any more? I know people are putting questions in the chat, but you know, to be honest, my eyesight's gone. So you know, basically, if you want to ask a question, put your hand up now.
Can I quickly say something? It's Robin from
Of course you can, Robin.
Chesterfield. It's
Hi,
just
Robin.
it's just to carry on from what Richard was saying about island mated queens.
Sound like they're in Hawaii.
We used to bring some in from Denmark, Peter Stugard and Carl, I can't remember his surname now, 2 breeders there. We used to bring in from them, buy in breeder queens from them, and they were Buckfast strain, and they were very successful. And so I was just saying it as a way of supporting what Richard was saying about island mated queens as breeder queens.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's absolutely true. You're getting someone's work right into your apiary. It's like really, it's like living the dream, really, as far as beekeepers work. If people realized how much they can benefit by just buying one queen and grafting from that daughter. I know there's the issue of, should you be buying in breeder queens that aren't from your area? Well, that's the issue, because they won't do as well. But as long as you're buying one that's suited to your own climate zone, I would agree that's absolutely brilliant. And I do that. Because the daughters I get are fantastic. That's what, and also the first cross, the F1 from those queens, that's the one that makes your honey. If you could buy it, sorry?
Can I ask a question? Why do you buy in breeder queens if you're making your own queens?
Because my breeder queens haven't got the genetic line that I want, because they're so what I was just going to explain is when I make my daughters, okay, they are F1s, the first cross, and they're the ones that give me the honey. If I allow them to get the next cross, F2, F3, they get more and more traits of the genetics that are around, okay? So, but if I buy a breeder queen, I'm going to get a good percentage of straight genetics that will be the ones I want. Whereas I don't want aggressive bees, I don't want black bees, I don't want, and when I say black bees, I've got to be careful here, because I'm not saying there's anything wrong with AMM, but the AMM we have here are atrocious. The third, second, third, fourth cross are just terrible bees to work with. Okay. So that's why I do buy breeder queens in, okay? But if I can inseminate one myself and I know the lineage and I'm happy with her and she produces well, I'll graft from her. Why not? Absolutely, definitely, you know.
Okay. Suzanne Foster has been waiting very patiently. Suzanne, are you there?
Hello, yes, I am. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to ask a second question. Firstly, thanks so much to Cambridge Beekeepers Association for asking Richard to do this talk, because I'm learning so much from it. It's really wonderful. This particular...
I don't know how many times I have to be on WhatsApp with him to get this to happen.
Thank you for your diligence. I would like to ask, is there a point where you need to pay for an apiary site rather than just giving honey to the farmer? Because I've noticed on some of your sites there's an awful lot of hives. I'm on one farm, but I just have a couple of hives there. So is there a point where you should really be paying for that site, or where a farmer would expect payment?
Okay, I have definite views on this. The site that you will find is generally an area of the farm where the farmer can't do anything else with it, because if it's growable, there'll be a crop in it. And that's the problem you find, is you end up looking in the corner of somewhere. And my attitude is, you manage that site, you give the farmer some money, the farmer some honey, or whatever he wants. But I work it out as what I pay over here is I pay 5 kilos per apiary in the spring and 5 kilos in the summer. And to me, that is an absolute gift, because they have done absolutely nothing to earn that. I've actually maintained their land. And if they want any more, I'll sell it to them at a better price. But I just feel that's a really good deal. And most of them are absolutely ecstatic with that, because in France, there's obviously a lot of land. The area is like 3 times the size of the UK, so the population is less. But I do have problems finding the sites I want, because as the more experience you get, the more picky you get, and the closer you want to get your vehicle to the site. So it becomes more and more of an issue trying to find the best apiary sites, because you do not want to be walking with supers. But when you have one apiary, just chat to the farmer and just say, you know, I'm only going to have a couple of hives there. Can I pay you a couple of pots of honey a year? It's the easiest way, is the communication thing. You know, they can't expect you to give all your honey just because you've got 2 hives there. And it wouldn't matter. I have a maximum of between 15 and 18 hives per apiary, but I still give them the same amount of honey, because I don't feel that they have done any work towards that. My bees are far enough away for them not to cause them a problem. If there is an issue, I say to them, this has to work for both of us. And I say this right from the start. And we kind of draw up on it. We go for everything and say, if there's a swarm, I will come and collect it. You must tell me. Don't do anything yourself. If there's a problem, if the bees are getting in your way, let me know and we'll come to a solution. Don't just think that because I rent your land, I'm not going to be open and all that. You have to give that degree of flexibility. But if it works well, you should not be paying much. You should just be giving a token amount, as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I do. So
that's really helpful. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
I think someone called Richard Senior raised his hand. And Kokin, if you want to speak, you're next.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Hi. You mentioned my weight in Scotland for artificial insemination. I noticed nearly 12 months ago that his website went down. I just wondered if you knew or had spoken.
Yeah, at the moment, all I can say is I spoke to him about maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I had a good chat with him, but he's actually stopped running instrumental insemination courses at the moment, and he's now doing woodwork. So
I was booked on one of his courses, and of course COVID hit, and he had to cancel, rightly so. But then when his website went down, I just wanted to make sure somebody had heard from him. That's all, because he seemed
I believe he's fine. I know he had suffered a bit of health issues, and he's had some surgery, I believe, but that's all gone really well, and everything's great. So as far as I know, he's great, but he's just changed his vocation for a while, and I don't know whether he'll be doing instrumental insemination in the near future. But
super, thanks, Rich.
Anyway, no problem. Thank you.
So Jennifer Perry, you're next.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with Richard on the comment about the farmers and paying money for keeping the bees on their site. My farmer absolutely will not accept money. They want my honey in return for keeping my bees on their site.
I think that's fantastic. Thanks. I agree. And I didn't mention there's always obviously the huge pollination issue, because if they got fields of all rape around, you're pollinating their crops. It's a win-win for everybody, to be honest. You know.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you.
And you have to do a lot of work to get honey these days. I don't know what it's like where you are, but keeping bees, because of Varroa, bees are not easy to keep anymore. I mean, I speak to my friends in Australia, and they go, oh, what's all this? You know, you just go and chuck a super on it, and you come back in like 2 weeks' time and take the super off. What's all this Varroa, an Asian hornet, and all these problems you have? Just, you know, and I'm like so jealous. But we have to work really hard to produce our honey. It's not easy. And I'd say to anyone who asks for a lot of money from an apiary, look, this is what we do. You will see me here regularly in the summer. We have to work really hard. Please reconsider that, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they say my honey is the best. They've never tasted anything like it. So
of course it is, because every beekeeper has the best honey in the world. No one produces any better.
I agree. Wonderful talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I've been asked to ask a question, but I can't find it. So Any other questions? Will I have a hunt for it? Anybody else want to ask anything? Please do. I'm searching for this question. I can't tell you.
Hi, Sally, it's Robin again.
Oh, good. Okay, Robin, you go for it.
It's
I'm looking for
not so much a question, but it's to confirm exactly Richard's comments about payment for having bees on farms and that. I run 3 separate out apiaries on 3 different sites, and I do exactly the same as Richard. I pay in honey. Over the time, I've actually done the same as him, found the best sites because I want my vehicle as close as I can for lugging heavy supers. And the farmers are only too appreciative of me having my bees on their land. So yeah, I wouldn't want to pay either. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a nice comment. Thank you. I have no idea what other beekeepers pay actually, but when I do kind of ask the question to the beekeepers here, they seem to pay an awful lot less than I do. So I'm thinking, I think my tenants are on, my landlords are onto a good thing with me. But I'm happy, they're happy. That's the relationship I want. I don't want stress. My whole attitude is, I need to come into an apiary. I don't like to be social because I cannot spend hours going, hi, how are you? How are the bees? You haven't got time for that when you're a professional. As much as it's nice, you do it in the winter, but when you're in the summer, you just get in there and you get straight on with the job, and then you're on to the next apiary. There is no time to spend an hour drinking coffee every time you go to a different apiary. I wish we could, but but that's what you have to be. You have to be able to get in, and I think the owners know that you want to come and you're managing a stock. You need to get in and do the job and get out again to the next one.
Okay. So I found Kokin's question, so I can ask it. What do you think of polyhives?
Well, polyhives are really good. I love them, but they have downsides. I have all my, well, not all, but most of all my 6-frame nucs are polyhives. They're HDD, high density polyurethane. And I think they're really good, same as my Mini Plus. And I think they're excellent. They're very light. They're easy to move around. The only thing is they're a pig to clean, and you end up using bleach. I love using a blowtorch on my hives, on my old wooden nucs, because you just know that it's clean. It gets all the mess off, one fell swoop, and it's done. You're back to square one. With a nuc, you're never quite sure. There's loads of people have had poly nucs for a long time, and all you can say is they seem to be great. But they're less resistant to woodpeckers. We've had some martins eat the base of ours out of a couple of ours. They're less strong. You can't chuck them around that much. You've got to have something to hold the roof on properly, not like a wooden nuc. When you've got a decent roof on a decent roof on a wooden nuc, you can put them in the back of your truck and they're still there when you come back, when you get to the apiary. If you don't secure your poly nucs, you lose roofs. I mean, it's just it's a foregone conclusion. It's an extra dimension when you use poly nucs, but they are light. That's the thing. They're nice to handle, and they have good temperature values in the winter. They are good insulated nucs. Okay. So it swings and roundabouts, but I think overall I will be going back to wooden nucs myself.
Could I ask a question? I'm sorry, I don't have a camera.
You can, but then it's Margaret. Okay.
I've just spent a few days in the workshop and I've built myself 10 wooden 5-frame nucs. Normally,
where are you based?
In Leicestershire.
Okay.
But I normally use Cuprinol Clear, but I gave Axo Nobel a ring to see if it was okay to use that on beehives, and they said not. So having made all these nucs, I'm not quite sure now what to slap on them to preserve them. Any ideas?
Well, when I'm in the UK, when I can get stuff from the UK, I get Ronseal exterior wood preservative, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. Blah blah blah. Lol. But it is really good because it's a water-based gel, and you can paint it on in many coats, and it is no odor at all. That's what I use. I mean, I've done loads. When I first started, I creosoted the inside and outside of my hives, and the bees were absolutely fine. They probably will get cancer, but they're absolutely fine, because it's carcinogenic. But in South Africa, they are still creosoting the inside and outside of their hives, and the bees are absolutely fine. I think if you ask someone who has all the figures in front of you and ask the correct person about a correct product, they will say, don't use it on bees because because obviously they've got to cover themselves. But there's many products that are used of absolutely no visible, change, and it preserves the boxes. But the boxes, no one's found a box. The only way to stop your boxes rotting is to wax dip them, hot wax dipping. If you can hot wax dip them, the boxes will last your whole beekeeping career, and you can take them out and paint them after, and the paint lasts for 30 years as well, because it's sucked straight into the wood, and it's absolutely brilliant. But the risk of hot wax dipping, you have to have the correct setup. You've got to have the proper cauldron with a closable lid. You've got to use the right materials, and you just need to, it's a lot of work, but once you've done it, you've got your hives forever. That's the only material I found that doesn't rot. Everything goes eventually, apart from polyhives.
Okay. Margaret, are you there? Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I was more just to say on the poly nukes, I have a big tub that I boil up with water, and I put them in there and hold them in for a few minutes with washing soda. They have a good soak. I scrub them with a churn brush, hose them down, and they're absolutely spotless. So that's
Margaret,
how I deal with mine.
Yeah, we do actually use soda crystals a lot, and often we just use a soda crystal solution. That's one of the safest things. And I've found out since that soda crystals is actually one of the best things for breaking down in the environment after you've used it. It virtually disappears to nothing. It's not like bleach or whatever. It's very, very environmentally friendly, and it works really well on hives. I totally agree. That's one of our, we use loads of it here.
And they do come out, the poly nukes do come out really spotless afterwards. And, I tend to, when I've emptied all the winter nukes out and got rid of them all or put them in main boxes, I have a session and do the whole lot, and anything polystyrene that day, I gather it up and do it all together. So that sort of deals with that.
Absolutely. It's like a one-off clean. You do it all, get it all done. I actually clean my plastic Nico queen excluders in exactly that. I have a big barrel I've cut in half that goes on top of a gas burner. I heat it up to near boiling, and I just dunk every excluder, and they come up absolutely spotless. So,
and not leave them in there too long.
No, I know, but these ones are, I have to say, most of the kit by Nico, I wash it. I wash all my queen rearing cages. I wash the cell cup holders, the cells, obviously the cell cups themselves, we can't reuse those, but I wash everything else and it comes out brilliant. It doesn't seem to warp with the Nico stuff. But it's whatever you've got, and if it works, do it, and it's brilliant. So soda crystals are excellent.
Okay, I think that may be all the questions for everybody. I don't see any more hands raised. I sorry if I haven't asked your, oh dear. I haven't asked your question, but I think, Richard, it's 11 o'clock, isn't it, for you? 10 past 11.
Yeah, it's just 8 minutes past 11, yeah. But
if
anyone wants to ask a couple more, I'll do it, but then we can aim to wrap it up if you like.
Okay, well, has anybody got any more questions, or you're off to bed?
Off to bed, I think.
Oh, could Richard spell out the wood treatment he uses? Spell it out. Somebody's still coming into the waiting room. I'm finding this really
it's Ronseal 5-year wood stain, it's called.
Okay. Do you hear that? Ronseal.
But I've used that on all my hives here, and it doesn't flake, it doesn't blister, doesn't peel. And if you want to give it a second coat, you haven't got to rub it down. But in France, we tend to use whatever you can find at the DIY shop that's going cheap. And that's why a lot of poly hives, we obviously paint them like everyone else does to help not get damaged by the sunlight. And they're all multicolored, and it just reflects on what the DIY shop's got going cheap. But regarding wood treatment, whatever you seem to use, eventually, unless they're dipped, they will rot eventually. But you can delay it.
Can I ask another question, because I'm ignorant here. All of you seem to know what this is. When you use the word island-mated queens, what island are we talking about? Okay, well, island-mated refers to the fact that it's a place where no matter how many colonies, no matter how... Are we talking colonsay? Sorry? Are we talking like colonsay in Scotland? Well, let me explain. It's an island that has no other colonies around it, with about 10 kilometers or more. Okay. Okay. So whatever you take to that island will only mate with what is on that island. And so if you take the drones and you take the virgin queens, they're only going to be able to mate with what is. But if you had, for example, say the island was 10 kilometers from somewhere else, but on that 10 kilometers,
there was another hive with some horrible drones, and they could fly 5-8 kilometers towards you, and you could fly 5 or 8 kilometers towards them. What I mean is it's not controlled. This is a completely isolated place. Brother Adams used to use the one at Sherborton, I think is it Exmoor?
Yeah.
And that's where he
Salisbury
used to do his island mating. That was basically it's still isolated now if you can use it, but the problem is getting there. And I know Peter Little, who used to use it, says the problem is getting there. It's a lot of way to go to get isolated where you can inseminate now. And that's why insemination, but for instance, in Holland, there's a lot of little islands. That's why these people have raised fantastic queens, because they have control over their drones in open mating. So that gives you your F1s that are island mated.
And that's why Peter Stugard in Denmark, he and Cole, they had islands that they virtually owned, and they did their mate, so no one else could get access to those islands. In Denmark, it's off the coast of Denmark. There are a number of islands, and they use those islands for their queen rearing programs.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's absolutely correct. And when you buy queens from Marken now, they're all island mated.
Well, I have to say, there's tons of amazing information in the chat too, which as well. So every comment you make, somebody adds something else to, Richard.
Well, that's what it's all about. It's all about sharing information. And,
yeah, it's brilliant.
I hope tonight that some people are going to have a go at queen rearing. Well, they might say, no, it's not for me, because Richard said that if I want to do it properly, you need to do it correctly. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And I strongly say that. And I also will add that I don't think people should really, this is my own personal opinion, I don't think really people should be looking at rearing queens unless they've got at least 2 years experience in beekeeping.
Okay.
Or unless they do it with someone else, because you don't have the understanding. You need to be able to read the frames. You need to be able to read the bees before you even begin to go down that road. And some people think otherwise. That's just how I feel.
No, I think that's good. Really helpful. I mean, I've got about 8 years, and I certainly won't be doing it.
And Brother Adams did have his isolation apiaries on Dartmoor.
Okay.
Going back to the island mating again, so Brother Adam could do one lot of drones each year. I've got mine from Carl Brandstrom, my breeding stock. So each session they can go 13. They can have 39 sets of drones. There's 39 islands they use for the mating islands. So every session they can try 39 different combinations. And then get their breeder queens from there. And the breeder queens are always 2 years old, because obviously they want to go a full season and then breed from the second year and then see what the offspring are like, but they can do it. So it's every year they go 39 times further than Brother Adam could do. So it's mind-blowing. Yeah.
I mean, it must. I mean, me jumping in again. It must be very good, like in America, because you can't buy in queens. You have to breed, don't you? There is the rules, isn't there? So it must be, really good advice, like what your, Mike Palmer's and yours advice on breeding queens.
Well, you can buy queens in America. You can buy them in from Canada still. There's certain ways you can. Yeah, I mean, you can buy them in from Hawaii, and they're separate, because obviously a lot of queens are raised in Hawaii by Big Island queens. They're banked and they're overwintered for the early almond pollination in January, February, all that kind of stuff. So they do make a lot of queens in Hawaii, but you got to ask yourself, are they suited to the climate they're going to? That's the thing, and that's why I talked about banking, and I was asked about it, and I said, from what I've heard, a lot die, and they're not that fantastic. But if you look at it as a business and you're able to get bees in boxes for almond pollination, which earns big money, if it works, they do it. It's not, but there is ways you can get queens into America, and you can actually import drone semen. You can actually import drone semen into America through certain channels, so you can spread the genetics in. So.
Okay. So adding to that, there's a story going around that when Brother Adam was alive, they wanted to get Buckfast into the States, and it was some Texans. They came over to Buckfast, and they worked out they could take eggs back, but not larvae. So they went down to Buckfast, they cut a chunk out of a nice frame of eggs, wrapped it up, and flew back to the States. And that's how they got the first lot of Buckfast in. and they just got over there as they were turning into larvae, and away you go, and inserted the chunk of comb into another bit over there.
Okay,
that's how they did it.
It's interesting. It can be done. I've done it myself. I've sent eggs in the post to people in France and to people in the UK originally. One friend of mine took it on a plane, and they put them in his colony, and they hatched out, and he grafted from those. As long as you put your frame and you time it, it's perfectly okay. Technically, it's probably illegal, but you can do it very easily.
Do we cut that bit out? Okay. Okay. I think it may be, and you know, it's my bedtime anyway. Any more questions, or shall I make Richard the host, or shall we just close it down? I think we need to close it down, gang. So half the people probably aren't here anymore. 61 are here, and I'm sure
there's still 61 here. Anyway, can I just say thank you to everybody for the chat after. It's been great. I hope you got something out of it.
Lovely, thank you.
And maybe we'll see you again next autumn for something else, but I'm not doing any more talks now for this year. We finished
You'll
because
only be talking to Cambridgeshire.
Absolutely, of course.
See you on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to be doing that, concentrate on that a bit. So I hope you all had a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you very much for your comments. It's been nice to meet you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great season.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Cambridge Beekeepers.
Thanks very much,
Bye.
Richard.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers,
Bye,
bye.
everybody. Bye.
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 Thanks, Richard.
Bye.
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Right, Richard.
you,
I think
Sally.
Richard